What's up? I believe we're live. I think we're live finally. Boom. So, Ripple Effect Podcast, thank you so much for joining me. This is my 500th episode. I'm going to have tons of friends jumping in, jumping out, joining me for this episode. It's going to be kind of like the Union of the Unwanted, very laid back. Everybody's talking, hanging out, and it's going to be fun. And I'm sure I'm going to do a little bit of reflecting on these 500 episodes and much more. So let's get these friends, and I also have a couple Patreon supporters that I send out the invite to. So hopefully they join us too. Let's see what happens. Admit everybody. Let's see what happens here. And people are jumping in now. What's up, Matt?
Hey, Ricky. Hey, I'm okay. How you doing?
What's up, guys?
Congratulations on your 500th show. That's amazing.
Yeah, congrats, Ricky. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, when you listen to like Rogan on a regular basis, it doesn't seem. I mean, he's up to like thousands, but it's. I think the average podcast does like 7 episodes or something like that. So it definitely pretty wild. And I think one thing that we've all learned talking to so many interesting people throughout the years is the fact that a lot of the difference between the people who make it this far and the ones who don't is that you just never gave up. You know, it's hard work and luck will cross paths eventually, but you have to keep chugging away. Even if you're not ready to start, like just start somewhere, do something, and then hopefully you'll figure it out in the process. So yeah, without a doubt. And looks like we're gonna have a great lineup of people joining us. We could talk about everything and anything. Hopefully the lineup's so good we can compete with Putin and Tucker tonight. That's pretty wild, huh? What's everybody's thoughts on that? Anybody have a opinion on good, the bad, the what's your thoughts?
More of the show. Just more of the show, man. It's turning up the volume on the weirdness and it's getting fun. So yeah, enjoy it, right? Get the popcorn.
Yeah, amazing. Paulie's done a pretty good infographic insofar as like documenting the controlled dialectic of like Tucker and Rogan and a number of people in that sphere of influence and exposure. And it's one of those things where it dissuades further inquiry into the kind of stuff that we talk about firsthand. And then it kind of just pools it within a subsidiary mainstream environment. So it's one of those things where, just like Brandon said, more of the show. It's
Yeah,
That's what's going on.
I think that there are certain officials in Washington that would like to go back to what they think of as the glory days of like 2001, 2002, when Putin was offering to have Russia join NATO. And there was this idea, there was this massive voice within the Washington establishment that they could somehow get a US-Russia relationship against China. And Russia was really going along. I mean, the US had pretty much dominated Russia in the 90s, right? They still have the CIA with their special bureau, like special office controlling a big chunk of the Russian military itself. So they had everything that they wanted, but I think they got a little bit overly greedy. And now they're trying to go back in time 18 years ago and reestablish that somehow. And I don't know. That's my take on it. I'm not too sure. And I think Tucker is just sort of being used to somehow put a bit of a an off ramp or something, or a bit of a dialogue process, kind of like how Jeffrey Sachs is being deployed as well to do the same thing, but with a different crowd.
So nobody thinks that it's anything more than a show because it's just to be the devil's advocate. Obviously Tucker got pushed or shoved out of Fox News. He had the highest rated show on the network at the time, and really it was kind of it it showed that because a lot of people saw Fox News as the good guys during COVID because they were at least the least of the evils in mainstream media because they would have people on like Peter McCullough and others. So I'm curious if like Tucker is either a part of some greater plan and game, or is he really just somebody who says, hey, you know what? Like, I'm going to push back against the mainstream narrative a little bit, and I'm going to give people a perspective that they haven't seen. Maybe the people need hear Putin's perspective on what's going on in Ukraine. And that's, so does nobody thinks that like maybe there are some good intentions in this at all?
Oh no, dude, like you're so spot on when it comes to p different people's mindsets and what their respective motivations are isn't really what's in question when you bring to the forefront the idea that it's a show. It isn't that they're controlled, it's that they're convinced of the story that they've been told. It's very important distinction. A lot of when we have these conversations, we think, oh, you're controlled opposition. You're this particular position, which is in alignment with that bureaucratic institution, which oriented you and the things that you would or would not say at their discretion. Not really necessarily how it works. Mostly people censor themselves. They reinforce based on the investments of their perceptual reality. And then that is reinforced by the echo chambers of the emotional support systems that are their friends and family. It's much more to do with the stories that we have been told, the incentives that were offered to continue telling those stories, and the raw egotism of us continuing to conform to the constraints of the system that we were incubated in. It's a byproduct of living in the terrarium. So when I say that it's a show, a lot of people are still full blown committed to the idea that it's not a show. They're just not fully in the know.
And
Well,
it's just beautiful.
one of the things I'd say, Ricky, it's like with your show in particular, by the way, congratulations, man. Like it always impresses me, like some of the interviews you're able to land. And it's like you've been able to put me in touch with some people, and I'm always grateful for that. But it's like sometimes I'll see an episode of yours drop and I'm like, damn, how did Ricky get in touch with that guy or that gal? Right. And so it's just like, damn, so cool. And you kind of and as a podcaster, you kind of get that bug where it's like, ooh, I wonder if I can get an interview with that person, right? And it's like a challenge, like, okay, how do I get in contact with that person? And maybe Tucker's just been bitten by the bug. And he's like, how do I get an interview with Poop? And he's like, all right, I'm going to make that. I don't
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, a little bit. Like I'm curious if he is just like pushing, maybe he is bitter, right? Like every great athlete has those people who doubted them or rubbed them the wrong way or talk trash. And then they're like, you know what? I'm gonna make it my life journey to shut them up or push back or get back at them. And he obviously got pushed out of Fox News, and now it seems like he's like extra motivated. And honestly, with RT being banned in the US, I'm a big believer of just like being able to or being willing to talk to everybody and anybody. I remember like when I had Professor Richard Wolf on the podcast, like one of the first people who reached out to me, like the day I think I put it out was Charlie Robinson. He's like, "Hey, great episode," and I'm just like, "Charlie, you're like." A anarchist, libertarian-ish thinking person. Like, I can't believe that you actually listened to that episode. Like, and went out of your way to listen with the day it dropped. And I think it was just like a reflection of his character. Like, hey, I don't want to just assume I get it or I know his stance. Like, let me also be curious and hear somebody out. And I love people like that. I love shows like that. I think one of the really special things about the Union of the Unwanted is the fact that we do have so many people that come together for a common good, but yet like there's a lot of disagreements. I mean, we know certain people like, okay, somebody just said something and you could see somebody else's face and you're like, yeah, you could tell they disagree with it, but everybody's polite because it's like as long as we all focus on the common goal of like, okay, we might not always agree on the solutions, but we definitely agree on what the problems are and who the problem or who's creating the problems.
Yeah, I like the fact that Tucker brought him on because, I mean, he was censored from Fox and Putin, who knows how much he's been censored. We can only imagine. So getting out the real story, quote unquote, but from that perspective, I think is incredibly important. Whether we end up agreeing with him or not, or see something new or not, we have to be allowed to create these spaces where free speech is actually free. And shows like this do that. But it's so rare, even on YouTube and well, not even on YouTube, even on any other alternative platform you can think of, we're still censored. I was on a platform recently where we were talking about vaccine entry and we were talking about the SV40 contamination in the COVID jabs and how we've known about that for forever and about how it causes cancer. And we were even being removed from quote unquote alternative platforms because they were saying that we were doing, again, misinformation and whatnot. So I think the fact that Tucker is having Putin on is a great idea. I appreciate the fact that he's willing to put himself out there and do that. And who knows, we might learn something new.
Well, I agree. I always say the difference between the US and Russia is that we do better PR because we, you know, we do a good job of selling a conflict and convincing everybody it's for some moral reasons. And Russia just like, you know what? Like, no, you're getting in our territory. It's and all. Oh, you got something to say, Steve?
Well, what we did was a great job in removing skin from the game, skin in the game from the average American when it comes to military service. It's been 50 plus years since, you know, anybody with kids has had to worry about their son or now their daughter getting drafted. It's been 50 years since anybody growing up and going through this country has had to worry about that. So we've fetishized the people who have been military service members. It's thank you for your service. And then you've said your obligation, you've done your duty, and that's it. And that's how we've done war for a half a century now. And it's become more and more and more impersonal. So it doesn't matter that the vast majority of the country has war fatigue and has had it for a very, very long time. That doesn't matter. Just like it, okay, I can't believe that it's 2024 and I'm going to explain how a counter narrative management operation works. Okay. Because there's a narrative management operation that we can all see. And everybody knows that Joe Biden is a doddering, demented fool and that there's going to have to be some kind of thing. Everybody knows that Donald Trump is, you know, the bad guy, but he's also the guy who gave you Operation Warp Speed. Look for that to become a huge talking point in the Democratic run media going forward, because they really need to make sure that that Republican base is fighting super hard over the jibby jab going into the 2024 election. So as all of this information is coming out, kicking a giant hole in that COVID narrative, you've seen a whole group of people get elevated, worship a genocide, and while they're doing that, they are forming the allowable parameters for conversation going forward in the new alternative media. That's the counter narrative operation. There's mainstream narrative, new mainstream narrative, narrative, counter narrative. Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Elon Musk, all of those people represent the new mainstream media. I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years now, and holy crap, is it wild? It's like kind of sort of starting to, like I saw the chart that Tease was talking about, the poly made. Fantastic. Fantastic. It's going to take another 5 years before people start to pick up on it, but holy crap, let's start to pick up on it.
Yeah, spot on, Steve. Love you. Thank you. Great commentary.
What was the chart? So specifically,
So really what it is it's you have to understand that, so the whole Lenin idea that control the opposition, will lead them ourselves. It's really just they're creating these various different emotional kind of pools that then suck us into them, and we invest in them so much that if we betray that, either we feel like fools or we get shamed by all the other people who are sucked into those pools. So it's a pool party. We're all hanging out at these decrepit pool parties. There's way too much chlorine in there. Some of them are nothing but piss. I'm going to allude to Tim Pool for that pool, and I wouldn't recommend swimming in what he's been diving in, and that's a problem that we got. And it's one of those things where the chart, if you check out Amazing Polly, she does sometimes great work, sometimes I quarrel with it, but that's kind of the nature of the community. We all have our opinions and the various different contentions that we make. I've also posted a video on my Twitter recently that goes into a kid who wound up dead for exposing how Rogan is basically just a controlled up. And that's one of those things
Matthew
where
North.
yeah. And so the more you dig into this kind of stuff, the more it kind of just reveals the sophistication of the narrative management that we ourselves are ill prepared to really step up to the bat for, because to a certain extent, all of us in one way or another, in one issue or another, have kind of been sucked into those pools. And that's a dirty feeling. And that's kind of where we're at.
Welcome to Career Suicide with T. Snyder.
There you go. I gotta push back on Polly a little bit, because like somehow like Foster Colson and the Wellness Company, because he just bought Vigilant News Network, like he's on that list, they're on that list, and by extension, because we're us and Injected are partnered with the Wellness Company, like we're getting called out for like, and I'm like, bro, it's like
thank you.
no, completely off it.
I,
Like,
I,
what the
I
hell are you talking?
say
Yeah.
that. I mean, you could, I'm sure I've had people on this podcast that are linked to really shitty people, and you could probably put together a pretty good video of,
Yeah.
hey, look, Ricky's linked to this guy, friends with that
I
guy,
know. Exactly.
and connecting all these dots. And I mean, I'm not sold. I'm not sold on. I keep hearing this thing like the new mainstream media, the new mainstream media, the new mainstream media. It's either planned and controlled, or it has happened organically because people are waking up.
Do
And
you
I
remember Cass Sustein, the guy who wrote the cognitive infiltration document in the Obama administration, the guy who's currently writing border policy, the guy who's married to Samantha Powers, that Cass Sunstein? Let's go back to cognitive infiltration for a minute. Now, that document is about a dozen years old, and it lays out the platform for how intelligence infiltrates, takes over, and gets a hold of social media and the independent media. We are a dozen years into this. Look at it in the same general time frame as the Smith Modernization Act, something we've all talked about, reported on, I think, over the years quite a bit. At that exact same moment, there are people who have been spooked up from day one, coming out with the outline for how you infiltrate and insert your own influencers into this burgeoning media apparatus. So it's very, very odd to me that people can look at the mainstream media, or what is clearly that like immediate 1 degree away from the mainstream media sphere, that does largely exist as like a catch net for people backing away from the mainstream. You can look at that and go, man, those guys have easily got like a $10 million budget. Those guys are rolling in it. Man, those guys came up with $50 million. Can you imagine what we could do with with the actual truth we could tell with that money, with $50 million? And then they give Joe Rogan $250 million in all of the platforms, and people go, it's a win for us.
I again, I'm not sold. I'm all I'm hearing is like, and I'm just being the devil's advocate a little bit, but a little bit it's also because I'm like, there's
Show me where the pattern's broken in how a media operation lines up, unfolds, and is put out onto the people. Show me where the pattern deviates, and I will jump right the heck on board with you, brother. I will. I promise you.
Well, I'll tell you where. Well, the thing is, in with that argument and that perspective, you could literally point the finger at anybody in alternative media.
No, you couldn't.
Man.
I mean, I don't. Go ahead, T. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Okay, I'll just say it this way. It's like there is the concept of freedom of association, which is very important. It means that we should be able to talk to people without that necessarily being emblematic of our thoughts or feelings, or that meaning that we directly support them as a person. So that underlying basic principle and concept is really important to bear in mind. And that's that. A lot of what has happened with the like cross-pollination of these conversations, the various different organizations and institutions that we either rely on for our goods and services or that prop us up in some capacity, like Scott was saying, he's kind of been painted by association because of like Unjected being partnered with, and then that can become problematic. Like one of my episodes is posted on band.video, and I personally think Alex Jones is basically an op. So there's one of these things where it's like just this giant washing machine environment that is the internet, and simply by existing in it, you're going to get splashback for participation. And that isn't necessarily one of those things where it's that you're in it together. It's that it is this kind of just digital terrarium that we're trying to grow in, and you end up bumping up against other things. And it's a very difficult thing to come up with the appropriate phrasing or metaphor for, because if you get into like just the raw data, it's so vast and expansive that it's just chart upon chart. It's like going through Richard Grove's brain. It's like you're just going to go insane. So it's really difficult to navigate, and that's the creation and control of narratives, and that's the fifth generational warfare weaponization of what we're currently living in, and trying to make sense of, and then go out there and tell the story of, so other people can understand.
But the only difference between Scott or myself and anybody else you point the finger at is the fact that you know us personally.
No, not at all. Because we know where you guys' money comes from too. We know who you associate with. We know who you've associated with for a long time. We know what they believe in. We know what boards,
You guys are getting
you know,
money.
you do or don't sit on. Like it's not like, oh, you had this guy on your show once, because that's retarded. Nobody believe, like, I don't think anybody believes that or is going to be advancing that argument. You know what I mean? Even though, well, none of us are, because I see my comment section, and we had the lovely Mel K on yesterday, and she always generates some feisty responses, boy. But I mean, like, you can, I don't know. I can tell basically immediately who's doing this authentically and who's doing it for a paycheck, or who's doing it because they struck out in Hollywood and podcasting is the only way they think they can pay their bills right now. So they're just going to freaking say whatever narrative management garbage or pop culture nonsense they can to try to get clicks. No, that's not.
Yeah, but
That's not the deal.
Rogan or Alex Jones fit any of those cues. I mean,
Alex Jones is on video telling people that he's probably been used as a controlled op. He's on camera confessing to this. He's on camera pushing the jab. He's on camera selling Donald Trump to everybody. It's, there's
a wrong opinion doesn't make you controlled. There's
no,
plenty of
no, you're exactly right.
There's plenty of people who love Trump, and doesn't mean they're all working for the CIA or they're a part.
Never said that,
dude. You're right, Ricky. I think we're saying the same thing here.
To me, that's
you're
not
so spot on.
Concrete argument. That's so it's like, oh, he likes Trump. And
no. There's a long established pattern over time of like
Corbett on back in the day, which obviously James Corbett doesn't go on there anymore. They disagree on many things, but he's had, I can make a list of a huge similarity in guests that have been on Alex Jones, JRE, and my show. We have similar guests. And so it's like, to me, this idea that like, oh, well, you've had the wrong opinion and I don't always agree with what you say.
That is not what I said.
I'm not saying, but I'm saying a lot of people think that. A lot of people are like, use that as their argument. They'll say, oh, well, he thought this on this issue. Okay, maybe he just got it wrong. I get shit wrong all the time. It doesn't mean that like I'm doing it on purpose. It's the same issue why I defended Jason Burmis with so many past guests who would say, oh, Loose Change got it wrong on purpose. I'm like, how can you be so clear of their intentions? Like, that's bullshit. To me, all you're doing is you disagree with somebody, and because you disagree with them, you assume it might, they must have got it wrong on purpose to deceive people. And to me, like, it happens over and over again in the alternative media community. And it's like, okay, well, if they've done some good, and not to say that like you can't to forget the bad that they've done. I mean, obviously Alex Jones has done a lot of things with a lot of these topics that we research and we talk about, because everything got related to like, well, Alex Jones talks about it, so it can't be a serious issue, or it can't be a serious topic, or it can't be a serious discussion because Alex Jones is also saying the same thing you're saying. But he also, like, there's a lot of people he red pilled throughout the years. I mean, some of the initial documentaries a lot of us ran into was his work, and a lot of the people, researchers and other great people that have, I mean, James Corbett, I ran into James Corbett because he was on Alex Jones, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And and then you look him up, and one thing led to another. Joe Rogan, like, if their plan was to use Joe Rogan to what, like, go against the grain so hard that he almost changed the path of history. I mean, his Peter McCullough show, his Robert Malone show, his, Brett Weinstein show, his Robert Kennedy Jr. show, his, all these shows literally are changing the way people look at the issues that they discuss. And so to me, it's like, if you're controlling it, what are you doing? You're trying to wake people up to these issues. so
Yes.
much to, I mean, what's plan B? Like, what's the next step?
You just described it exactly. That's what they're trying to do. In essence, what the poison pill for the controlled demolition of the American empire right now is the disclosure that we've been pushing for. So we're the adjacent community to the rotting infrastructure that they're trying to systematically undermine. A part of that is just the legitimate incompetence of a number of the Congress critters who are literally just controlled opposition or useful idiots, or they have like control file like Epstein honeypot kind of thing. Um, it's one of those things where you reveal the rot and decrepency of the pre-existing institution. You then seemingly have like a savior class who rushes in and they reveal a great number of things, but it isn't necessarily all the way to the community that we're in where it's the appropriate tone. It translates to real world action. It isn't the kind of thing where it, like RFK, for example, and to give you a
Real world action. I see when I go to protests, and especially during COVID, there was a lot of InfoWar stickers and shirts. So, I mean, I don't. How does that not translate?
Sure. So I quibble with the success and efficacy of the idea of a bunch of people waving signs and walking in circles from the get-go. In my own personal protest experience, it isn't necessarily accessible, and I'll continue with that in 1 second. But to give you an example of a presentation that succinctly encapsulates the idea, you could look at Dr. Shiva and his presentation going into the swarm, the not so obvious establishment. It's a kind of like a subsidiary pool of people who are ushered in as we come to understand how bad the original version was, and then we're supposed to give them our trust and allegiance so that they can usher us forward with the firsthand action that we then observe through the bumper stickers that are present in a variety of different protests. But
Hey,
that
fellow
doesn't.
patriot, are you waking up? Here, you look like you smoke a little weed. Here's Jimmy Savile's buddy, Russell Brand. Does that help? Are you good? Are you good with that? Can you, or do you prefer it with
Right,
one of Epstein's buddies?
Well,
Is it because we got it however you want with it's
what do you have
dial a
on Russell
savior
Brand?
now.
I'm just curious. Besides, like, what hard evidence do you guys have on Russell Brand? Because I'd love to hear it.
Aside from
No,
like the constant tongue baths of Jimmy Savile while he's working for BBC4, and like all of the separate different allegations that surround Russell Brand's particular tenure at
I'm not sold on
BBC4,
Alex.
I don't know anybody that's personally been in the room. No, I do not.
No,
I
no,
do
it's
not.
in the room. I mean, what has somebody said they saw
For
something?
25 years, and
No, no,
ask anybody who's been in entertainment in the
no, I'm saying,
UK for the last
what
25
do you
years.
know
There's
about Russell?
NDA.
But this is what happens. What do you know about Russell? Like you're saying he's guilty by association, basically. And if you're not saying that, then what are you saying? Because he's again like
Well, okay, again, there's been an established pattern in entertainment over a very, very, very
I'm
long
talking about
time.
evidence. I'm talking about what
Again,
this is
if
about.
you talk to people in UK entertainment, there are people that will talk about the massive amount of NDAs that surround Russell Brand and all of the allegations of
Speculation.
everything from like assault to trafficking, kind of like what Vince McMahon is going through now. And
Oh,
it
but
took 50,
there's text messages. Yeah, but that's what I'm
huh?
saying. Now, until there's some real evidence, I cannot just go
Right.
ahead.
Well, you got to wait until somebody wants to go ahead and break their NDA and see how badly their life gets
Well,
ruined. And that's kind of
I
the position that we're at with that sort of weaponized lawfare right now.
Well, one thing I do know is that there was fake allegations, right? Because the ones that came up recently and then magically disappeared, right? And those allegations pop up on just about anybody who's in alternative media or is now going against the grain or whatever. Like they can also use that against you, where it's
Yeah.
like, just it doesn't have to be true. Just throw it out there, put it in the metaverse, and then all of a sudden people are like, "Yeah, he's a scumbag. Like I can't trust him." And it's like that's like you're saying, like everything is a psyop, and the problem is like we do go around in circles because it's like, okay, maybe somebody's planting, these stories of non-disclosure agreements and all whatnot for the purpose of making people skeptical of them, or maybe they do exist. But that's why I reserve my opinion until there's something of concrete, because I would hate to be in that position where it's like, hey, I'm interviewing all the right people. I'm like putting my neck on the line to interview people. I'm sparking conversations in a world of mainstream normies, because a lot of people who know Russell Brand aren't people who are like, hey, I want to learn about big pharma. They're just like, hey, I think he's funny. I liked his stand up. Let me subscribe to his YouTube channel or his Rumble channel. And now I'm getting some information that's actually good. Like you got Ed Dowd on his show, or whoever it is that is actually sharing some good information. And it's like, so I'm not going to disregard. So this is the way I look at it. There's stuff I can see that I know for a fact. He's sharing information that we would share. He's interviewing people we would interview. He's red pilling people that we would hope to red pill. Okay. And then there's the stuff we can't see that there's no real evidence of. The non-disclosure agreements, the allegations of this or that or whatever. It's like, okay, well, do I jump on board of like, no, then he must be bad because, there's all these rumors and allegations? Or do I say, you know what, I'm going to reserve my opinion. I'm not going to say he's a messiah or a good guy, but I am going to say that like he's doing good work, and I'm not going to bash him or say, because this is what happens. It's same thing with like, Tucker, for example. Tucker isn't perfect by any stretch of imagination, but I'm not going to disregard the fact that he was willing to have Peter McCullough on his show, or Dr. Robert Malone on national TV when no other TV channel or station would have him. And so it's not to say that he does everything right and he's always on the right side of history, but I'm not going to minimize what that did and the help that that was to us and our message, because the bottom line is we wish when Dr. Peter McCullough was on the Union of the Unwanted, we could get as many people listening to him as a Tucker or a Rogan or whatever. So I don't want to minimize what they've done to help the effort. But so that's all I'm saying. I'm saying is there's things we know, like, okay, they're doing some good things. And then there's things that possibly could be true. But listen, I love James Corbett. I'm hoping he even joins us tonight. But his Elon Musk documentary, like, it's a lot of this. It's a lot of like, he was linked to this person, he was linked to that. But I left him like, yeah, I'm on board with what he's saying, but like, I'm not 100% sold.
You saw the GIF he posted today that has the X logo and then the tagline underneath it, the Everything app, right? On the tweeters this morning, you understand that that's the Chinese Communist Party's WeChat, that Elon Musk said, I would like to steal this and then have a team reverse it and then implement it into the United States. And that's how we're going to do life going forward. Thanks for all the defense contractor checks. I got some robot babies to make.
He is
one of the things that irritates me about the whole thing is the fact that, like, a lot of people are being propped up, as like the leaders of the COVID movement and all this stuff, or like they're just coming around to it now that it's safe and now that it's profitable to discuss these sorts of things. And that's what irritates me. Like, it was so hilarious. Like, Owen Benjamin the other day played this video of Brett Weinstein, like in the middle of it, where he was like, he's like, I ordered 25 bandanas and I have bandanas on my face. He was showing the goggles that he was wearing to the store to prevent the little dropples of spit from getting in his eyes and stuff. I'm just like, and his wife's like, well, now, honey, you don't actually wear those around the house, though, right? Like, she was like saying, bro, you gotta like chill out. Like, even his wife was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm married to this guy. Like, those are the people, like, in real time that are now coming around to be like the leaders of the code. It's like, now, not so fast. Not so fast. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what really gets under my nerve, because there's a lot of us that lost a lot from day one in the trenches over this shit. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm glad they came around now, but it's like, don't forget to replace it. But
no, I just want to pop in on what you were saying, Ricky. Is I think it's really important that people like us especially use discernment. All of us have been under some kind of smear campaign at some point. I've met Russell Brand once, maybe twice. I've had very few interactions with him. I have no idea what his history really is. But any of us, especially with AI technology now and the way that they can misrepresent videos and photos and I mean, I could fake documents. That's not something that any of us couldn't do here. So I do think it's really important that, just like Ricky, you were saying, we step back and we look at the totality of the evidence and see if it rings true to us. Does it actually add up? Use your discernment. It's going to get worse. These psyops are going to get worse. The leaders, the people that are actually trying to create change, it's going to get worse. I'm nobody in this space, but I'm heading over for the World Health Assembly's meeting in Geneva. And the amount of attacks that I'm under right now is just absolutely insane. And people calling me controlled opposition and saying that I'm a part of pushing through the IHRs and pandemic treaty stuff. I'm just a mom that's been here because my son almost died from vaccine 16 years ago. I have nothing else to gain from this except for to share this information. And I'm getting the same bullshit coming at me on a daily basis. So I understand what you're saying, Steve. Like, there are total actors out there. There are people out there that are evil. They're trying to lead us astray. They're trying to fuck us over in every way that they can, waste our time, energy, and resources, and make us look like idiots. But there's also people out there that are amazing, that are doing the
Absolutely.
work. And
Yeah.
they're trying so hard, but they're just getting destroyed because the other side doesn't like them. I don't even like to say other side because there's 50
Right. No, I mean, those are the people that we try to have on the show like every week. Yeah, I get it. I do.
I'm not
they're
fighting you
amazing.
saying that. I'm just
Yeah, yeah.
passionate
There's
about it.
amazing, wonderful, fucking like legitimate heroes that are out there crushing it every single day, and they're almost all reach limited, and they're almost all completely like search banned or shadow banned. You're never going to see them in a space with 150,000 people and blue checks lined up to go lick their assholes. It's not gonna happen. And yeah, no, I love each and every one of them, and I wish them nothing but like legitimate success.
And the Mel K thing was a perfect example of what we're discussing, because she is somebody who, like, for example, I know her and Pasta, if they were together, they would not agree on a lot. But if if we talk about, hey, are they on our team? Are they, our friends? We would say yes. And that's the thing. Like, I don't look at my friends any different than I look at, like, somebody else who is much more famous, somebody with a much bigger platform. They can be wrong on stuff. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr., obviously, you saw the Dave Smith debate, like, is very, adamant about his position on, on the Middle East and Israel, specifically. But as somebody who, like Susie, who's like one of my most passionate topics throughout the years, even when I started my podcast in 2013, like, it was always like big pharma, big pharma. How do I get people to realize how fucking big pharma is? Everybody wants to talk about wars. Everybody wants to talk about, geopolitical stuff and whatever. But I'm like, at home, I'm like, the biggest terrorists are at home and they're killing your loved ones. We're bombing overseas. That sucks. And that is really tragic, to kill innocent people overseas. But we're killing innocent people domestically with lying about, the products and all this stuff. And it's like, and then when Robert Kennedy Jr. came out as a, a face of the movement, and I'm like, this guy's a Kennedy and he's willing to put his reputation on the line. I'm like, I could talk about 9/11 without pissing people off as much as, vaccines. You can't even touch the topic in a group setting without everybody wanting to kill you, and looking at you like you're a murderer if you even, contemplate the idea of not vaccinating your kids. And, so I can't forget that, in all the years of him, doing, helping that movement and putting a respectable person that seems, doesn't seem, that isn't Alex Jones, as a face of the topic. He seemed reasonable. He had science. He knows the history. He knows the research. And to me, it's like, okay, now, a lot of people in the alternative media community disagree with him on his geopolitical stance. And now everybody's like, he's this, he's that, he's this. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, he's wrong on this issue. But like, how do you explain all the backlash, all the censorship, all the traveling, all the speeches, all the documentaries, all the nonprofit organizations that he invested in, before this? And then you're willing to throw that all out the window because this one topic? Like, I'm just not willing to do that, but I see a lot of people that are.
Because it isn't all the way. This is really about, we're coming from like an institutionalized slave system that we were all born in, that's designed to entrain us from cradle to the grave. And now they're disbanding the previous infrastructure to give us a kind of like bastardized transformer that makes us feel like the cool kids because we're out there waving it around and showing off what we got. It's not all the way. And that's ultimately what all the marbles are for, is, are we going to get sucked into the adjacent chamber that is being formed so that we'll say, hey, that's progress. But is it good enough? The answer is no, because it's basically just like kind of in the same way in which like the Treaty of Versailles was a rearmament period for the Second World War. And you could just argue that the First and the Second World War are one continuous thing, and that never ended, and it just paved the way for the world that we live in. It's the kind of the same thing that's happening with this. It's the disbanding of the pre-existing infrastructure to then create a seeming savior echo chamber that everybody's on board with because it is better, it is progress, but it doesn't allow you to go all the way. There are built-in thresholds that sustain it, and it is ultimately there, like the Treaty of Versailles was, to facilitate the emergence of the technocratic kind of like integration of digital systems over time. That's the
Except
real
for
op here.
Except for this time, at least in the West, it's being formulated to where we have the opportunity. That's right, boys and girls, the opportunity to purchase the equipment necessary to help construct their digital prison for us. And if you act now, while supplies are limited, and you give up all of your biometric data, and you promise that you will only engage in commerce and your trade via WeChat or X, then maybe once in a while we'll let you out of the 15-minute city. Deal?
You when you say it's not all the way, on the topic of big pharma, he went all the way. There was no
Oh,
further you could go. Like,
oh, oh, oh.
no, in
Um,
regard, he when you go on the biggest podcast on the planet, and for 3 hours you go through all the history of it. He laid it out, and he had the opportunity to do it. He could have easily been like, you know what, I don't want my first and maybe only appearance on the show to be only about this topic. And yet he laid it all out. He took the whole episode to really help people understand how it all started, all the science, all the fuckery, all the lying, all the deceiving, the meeting with Fauci, his interactions with Hotez. Like, he went into even the behind the scenes backdoor conversations, all that stuff. And so it's like, okay, so he didn't go all the way according to your worldview on geopolitics, because
no, no,
maybe
no.
bread and butter. Maybe he's like, you know what, this was the time for the last how many years. Most people didn't even know his opinion on these other things. He was known and he was interviewed for, either it was the JFK assassination, if it was the Robert Kennedy Jr. assassination, or it was, vaccines of big pharma. Like, or, they just want to know his upbringing as a Kennedy. But like, in regards to like strong stances on stuff, like the only real strong stance and the thing that he was like really pushing was his opinion on vaccines and the lack of safety and testing and all this stuff and all the sketchy science and all that stuff. And he would plant his flag there, even though he knew he would get pushback. So
Oh,
is it possible that he could just be incredible? I mean, it's no different than Alex Jones. People are always like, Alex Jones, and it's true. Like, for a long time, he would have just this echo chamber of Israel, apologist and all, and then, recently, and I honestly don't watch a whole lot of Alex Jones, but these debates would pop up, and I would run into them with him having somebody on, and he would do long form discussions, do like 3 hours, have a guest on that disagrees with him, and they would debate it. And I'm like, that's exactly what you should do. Like, you should put it all out there, and even at the end of it, like, you could still say, hey, you know what, I have a better understanding of your position, you have a better understanding of my position, but the fact that you're willing to even attempt to see somebody else's perspective, to me, that could be just somebody who is just, in my opinion, maybe wrong about a topic, or just has something wrong, or has a bias for whatever reason. And sometimes you're not even aware of it. I mean, I know people that have specific opinions on stuff, and there's no budging. Like, I could push and push and push, give them, logical reasons to think otherwise, and you cannot get through them for whatever reason. They have either been, it was an upbringing thing. It was just, a ego thing where they don't want to admit they're wrong. Like there could be many different things, but I don't pretend to know for certain why somebody has something wrong, unless, again, something for certain does come up and it proves like, hey, you know what? Like this is his position on stuff. His wife is in Hollywood. I mean, that could be a influence on his opinion, of course. And his family's been in politics, and everybody knows how much, influence Israel has had on American politics.
There is
Yeah.
that whole suicided wife, Mary Ghislaine Maxwell's best friend thing. But I mean, it's,
Okay.
I'm sure that was just a coincidence. And I'm sure that the several times, because he keeps lying about how many times he was on the Lolita Express, I'm sure that that was just convenience of travel. And I'm glad that we now know how many times there are that you're allowed to fly on Jeffrey Epstein's plane.
Okay, first of all, Brandon's taking off, so thanks for stopping by, Brandon. We love you. He does expanding reality, and he check out his show if you get the chance. Ricky's amazing. As far as the point that we're kind of like tying up here, you're so correct, Ricky, in your sense that he said a lot of stuff that was true. He did go out there and he got into a lot of the industry corruption in a way that I myself give him the appropriate citation on those points. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. It's one of those things where when I say going all the way, that's something that is uncomfortably far away from where we are right now across the board. That would be a non-materialist framework of assessment that steps outside of the bureaucratic institutions that have consolidated our viewpoint to be in line with how they retain their monopoly. So all the way is very far away from anyone who continues to view the world through the lens that they were born into. And so that's not even arguably realistic within the stretch of information that we're being presented with, and it's going to take time to get there. The dawdling and the idling in the intermediary stages is the controlled opposition that we're alluding to. And that's very difficult because this is like a 50-year time frame of migrating out of the machine without becoming the machine ourselves. And that's very difficult to do as people.
Can I add one little thought?
Sure, please.
Just on the issue of because it is delicate, right? The question of controlled opposition. How do you identify who's aware of what they're a part of, who's not aware, but they're maybe an influencer and they're not even aware, but they could go in one of either direction depending on what's influencing them. Like on the one hand, in a more recent instance, we had a lot of different influencers who emerged around, as representatives or of the whole QAnon phenomenon, which in my view was a military intelligence operation in 2017, just sprung out maybe as a rebranded version of Anonymous. That was like, there were some additions to it, and some people were very genuine. There were a lot of people who were very genuine, authentic people, and then there were a few who you're like, you know what you're a part of. So Simon Parks, for example, or what's his name? Parks something? Oh shit. Anyway, there's one guy who believes that he's like he really does seem to believe that his mother was an alien, and he's somehow receiving as a channeler information from these aliens. He sounds nuts, and I think that he believes what he's saying, but he was passing on information he was getting from a telephone that some shadowy figures would tell him about what QAnon's doing in the White Hats, and he would pass it on, and he had a huge following. Not Simon Parks was anyway. Then you have other figures who are like a lot more complicit, I would say, in influencing the entire QAnon apparatus. Steve Pietzenuk, that's who I was thinking of. This guy, Steve Pietzenuk, is a former assistant secretary of state under Henry Kissinger, as well as Cyrus Vance, and was a trilateral, and went to Bohemian Grove, and was all the first sociologist, psychiatrist in the 1960s, before he did all of these things in the 70s. And then he goes on and becomes like Alex Jones's big trophy insider, who starts like telling him back in 2008 how to interpret the world and how to interpret like school shootings, which Alex Jones just starts like believing is true, which sets this guy up for a huge fail. And and we saw how Alex Jones was just completely like taken through the mud based on things that he said in regards to a certain shooting. And the source was Pietznook. Now, Pietznook is from the get-go, even before there was QAnon, this guy was already doing these QAnon-y type drops and has been there since from the get-go, acting like he's some sort of an authority. And I would say somebody like that is probably very, very self-aware of what they're a part of, and I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. Whereas certain other people, they just don't know. And the last thing I was just thinking about was the first person who did the biggest expose on the Federal Reserve was this guy, George Sylvester Verrake in 1932. And George Sylvester Verrake was an Aleister Crowley compatriot. They were both working for occult networks of German intelligence in America during World War I and World War II. Aleister Crowley was like the editor of his magazine, doing what, was apparently like providing information to organize a pro German grouping inside of America, which was at the time still neutral before the U.S. entered. And this guy Verrake, he's a practicing occultist. He's tied up to the Ordo Templi Orientis, which has all these branch offs like the Scientology, movement around Hubbard, who's a follower of Crowley. And he writes all of a sudden in 32 how the Federal Reserve is this bankers conspiracy run by the architects of the Protocols of Zion as a Jewish bankers operation inside of America to take over America using Freemasonic conspiracies. And people like Henry Ford believe this stuff. And there's a lot of truth. That's why it works, is because there's a lot of truth in what they're saying, but it's where they redirect the causal nexus within the narrative to deflect it away from what people should have been looking at as the heart of this shadow empire, and they redirect it towards like the hate absorber, the protocol authors of the Jews. It's all the Jews, and then this guy goes and trains like Eustace Mullins, who's like a follower of Verrake, and George Freeman and David Irving, and all of these guys are all now taking a lot of truth that's outside of the mainstream. They're like, in the 50s and the 60s, they're like shapers of the conspiracy, narrative, that space that we're all sort of like moving in. But it's the environment, the ecosystem that they created has certain trappings, certain assumptions that a lot of people who are moving within the space don't even know of. Claire Chennault is part of the Flying Tigers operation, bringing in all the drugs and narcotics, from Asia into North America. And you got John Birch is one of his disciples, who creates, the whole John Birch Society is built up around something that was tied to high-level Masonic occult operations, bringing in the drug culture with the mafia, after World War II. And this is what Alex Jones's uncle was a huge follower of, who Alex Jones described influenced him a lot growing up, is the John Birch Society literature. And he had the head of the John Birch Society come onto a show. Does Alex Jones understand all of these things? No, I think he's got huge blind spots, but that makes him, against maybe his own desires, to be to put out things that will hurt people in a certain direction, even if he doesn't want to do that. And then you got people who do want to do that, who also act like, they're conspiracy gurus, and that's more dangerous.
Yeah, well put. I agree. As far as just
Super
like,
fair.
yeah.
Miriam, you want to jump in? And thanks for joining us, of course.
Thank you for having me. Hello. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy
That's
New Year.
very well said, Matt. It's very nuanced. We're in essence talking about the not so obvious establishment. And I think it's very important to relay that a lot of people say 80% truth, but they're omitting things and they're not saying the full truth. And in this this election year, now there's like an induction of what Amazing Polly is calling the new great narrative gatekeepers. And it's what I've been using Shiva's term of the not so obvious establishment, which is really Tavistock. It goes back to incrementalism. It goes back to infiltration. Absolutely, some people don't know that they're being co-opted or being used or controlled opposition. Perhaps, maybe some of us have been, we've said incorrect information. The difference is we'll correct ourselves. And I think also looking at if they come from the establishment, there's still this underpinning of indoctrination that's going on. And I will use the George Floyd as an example. So you have, an award-winning filmmaker, comes out with a film that doesn't fit the left or right dialectic. Oh, a year later, in response, we have this film, partly in response, I think, to my movie, because the first 10 minutes is like watching my movie, except it's not. And I'm not married to the lieutenant, the Trump-leaning lieutenant. I'm not part of the establishment. She's an Emmy award-winning journalist. And so that indicates being part of still the establishment. I'm not a chick off the street. I have an award-winning film. And yet the film is, I'm not taking it personally. It's more because the content doesn't fit the left-right narrative. And so we, if I tell someone, yeah, Russell Brand, which by the way, I helped get on Bill Maher to talk about my movie. He's seen Vanishing of the Bees. I was a big fan of Russell, but then I see how he's co-opted and now is the gatekeeper. Is Russell Brand looking at patents and studies and making calls to the FDA and the CDC as a real journalist? But yet the people but I love Russell Brand. Yeah, he's super magnamic. He's intelligent, he's articulate, but I'm just saying there's a distinction. And so it's not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I wondered with RFK, why wouldn't he say, my voice is the way it is because I'm vaccine injured, and his children are vaccinated if they're vaccine injured too. So I think you were referencing the Rogan, Ricky, the Rogan podcast. Were you?
Oh, with the RFK? Yes. Yep.
So why then, let's say when he goes on with Bill Maher, he'll defend and he'll say, I vaccinated all my children. Even though Bill Maher is, has been critical. So I think you guys were saying all in. I think that's where it comes in, all in.
Didn't he
Sorry?
vaccinate his children because he was actually pro-vaccine for a long time until the women harassed him, and he's told a story where he eventually said, hey, all these moms can't all be crazy, right? Like they're all following me all over the place. They're very passionate about this issue. Nobody will listen to them. And like Susie and Miriam and many of us know, like this issue, like you couldn't get anybody to listen to you. You couldn't get anybody to not look at you like you're crazy. And eventually he stepped up and said, you know what, I'm going to, be the face of this movement for the time being. And, it's the same thing with like Del Bigtree, right? Like we have people in our community that think he's just a fake and he's this and he's that. I'm like, okay, great. But the High Wire does probably some of the best journalism on, what's going on in the news in regards to big pharma. And they've been doing it for a long time and they do amazing work. I mean, Jeffrey Jackson's actually he moved near where I live actually, and I even know his wife. And so I've never met the guy honestly, but I wish I did. I've talked to his wife about like one day getting together and hanging out. But he like everybody who knows him has said nothing but great things about him. He does a great job in journalism. I know his wife has been in this community for a long time also, because she's also from Ludlow. And and it's just one of those things where like, there's people who have attempted to convince me that Del Bigtree is, he's a bad guy. That he doesn't go all the way, and he does, so it's like, it is one of those. Oh, go ahead, Tease.
Oh, dude, no, like you're so right. And remember, it was like a tweet that I sent you like 2 years ago or something. And I think you had posted that it's like two of my favorite people come together. And it was like Bigtree talking to Corbett. And that's one of those things where it's really important to remember, in addition to all of this, waking up, holy shit, it never stops. So there are some things that we just haven't been exposed to yet. And that was one of those things where at that juncture in Bigtree's development, he was still under the impression that Big Pharma was the epicenter, that it was the problem. And that's true. I'm not saying that's not the case. But if you get into the Rockefeller creation of the allopathic continuum that we've been zipped up in, it's a deliberately created body bag. So it's one of those things where until you step away from all these different like systems that create all these different body bags, you can't understand that it's actually a perpetual engine of genocide. And that's a really difficult, like very, very zoomed out thing to be able to see. So you will see with people like Del Bigtree, he's still waking up. And that doesn't mean he's controlled up. That's something that's still going on with all of us.
Very well said, Tease. I agree.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get the idea that like recognizing a thing means that you're emotionally invested in like feeling some kind of way about it, and it's just sort of recognizing the way that the patterns have played out over what is definitely not being talked about, what is being hyper sensationalized to the point of being discredited, especially when it's vitally important. And I think we all witnessed and experienced that in a lot of different levels, especially during COVID, where if the loudest voices are the ones that got the most public airtime about anything remotely rubbing up against the truth about what was going on, were the voices that have historically been used to discredit any sort of accuracy in a pushback over the last several years. Maybe I'm talking
But are you
crazy.
saying, Steve, that like you can get traction if you're louder? No, that's not what you're saying. Because
No, if I knew how to get traction, dude, I'd let everybody know. I would. I would open source that information, I promise.
Well, you can get traction. I mean, go. This is where like censorship. Why I constantly say it's so hard to do what we do because of censorship. Because you can go like how to manipulate the algorithms. Like there's hundreds that thousands of YouTubers that understand like okay, uh, what do they call it? ASQ, right? Like answer a specific question. Like you just put a video out, right? Like there's videos out there that something really simple, like how to drill into a wall. And that video has millions of views. Well, when you look at that book, YouTube Secrets, like there's plenty of other YouTubers like that guy, Sean Carroll or whatever his name is, that have done books like that where they're just like it's really like it actually is pretty simple. Like there's certain things that they will break it down statistically because they're number guys and they're business guys and they're entrepreneurs and they look at statistics and they can figure out like okay, these are the type of keywords that will get clicks. These are the type of videos. You can just ask something really simple. The majority of people who use YouTube are like I think it's like 70% are people who are asking questions. Like they're looking to figure something out. They're trying to like how do I do this? Or what's the truth about that? Or whatever. And it's like, so if you live in the Disney PG world of like talking about things that aren't really important. Not to say that I don't mean that. Well, kind of I do mean that, but either way, like you can have like a video of how do I what screwdriver do I use for this type of whatever, and have millions of views, and then you get somebody like you guys who spend hours and hours and hours researching something for a video or for some content that you're creating, and it gets no traction, and it's like I believe in capitalism, if it was actually capitalism. Like if it was like, okay, it's a free market where like your video is just better than my video. But the truth is it's not a free market because one, you want to just get clicks. Two, I want to, put out something that's meaningful and hopefully somebody gets something from. And three, like I have all the algorithms fighting against me, and just like we all do. Like you can put the best video out there, but the second they're like, what is he talking about? Hey, how about we tone this down a little bit? How we, I know a guy on Instagram, and Mary, I'm sorry, it wouldn't be a Ripple Effect podcast if I didn't rant for a little bit. And and I know this guy on Instagram, like who's from locally from a town right near mine, who's a basketball guy or a soccer guy, and he has. I remember he was telling me he's like, oh, I got an Instagram page, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, oh, let me check it out, and he had like hundreds of thousand followers, and I'm like, wait, this is your Instagram page? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, as a content creator, for lack of a better term, I know some people don't like that term, but I'm like, as a content creator, I'm like, I'm kind of curious. I'm like, how'd you get all those followers? Because he seemed like a pretty average dude, didn't seem like the most interesting guy on earth. And he's like, honestly, he's like, I was just making these videos on how to do a trick, with the ball. Like, okay, step one, you do this. Step two, you do. He's like, and I would just make them. And then he's like, one day, for some reason, Instagram decided to start suggesting my videos. And he's like, overnight, he just started getting like more and more and more. And I looked at him, and in a way, I was like happy for him. And in a way, I was almost upset because I'm like, none of us will ever have that opportunity to work our ass off and then cross paths with luck, and then all of a sudden they're suggesting our work, and then we just get a little spark of luck. If anything, it's it's the opposite. Like, we can work our ass off and do everything in our power to try to put out good content, and it won't matter because of the things we're talking about. And it's just a unfair, just playing field. And it just, in a way, it almost pissed me off. Like, in a way, I'm like, fuck, man. I'm like, we'll never get anybody who is in our world will never have, we'll never have that opportunity of just like, yeah, I just posted something, and for some reason the algorithms, start suggesting it, and then all of a sudden I took off. And we're never going to have that success story, no matter how many videos we put out.
Well,
We're
that
the
might
WNBA of this medium, though. We are like, we don't even support each other enough. Like, and we don't get enough fucking cross. We don't get enough fucking fan overplay. There's none of that. It really, like, it's sad, dude. Like we should all have each other's fucking shirts in a rotation that we just fucking have on fucking, like it doesn't have to be this way. I understand that we're up against insurmountable algorithmic fuckery. I get that. I do. But we don't have to play in their sandbox if we can figure out enough ways to bring other people into the various different sandboxes that we're networking through.
This is literally why I created my show. And it's like, so Ricky, in the paradigm that we exist in, wherein the entertainment that people turn to is the indoctrination machine, then people are constantly going to be going and tuning into Netflix to eventually predictively program themselves to be a basic bitch rather than stepping up their shit and gravitating towards what we got. So it's one of those things where we'd actively have to be conspiring together, or like Steve is saying, kind of promoting one another in order to then create a synergistic chamber that isn't about echoing, it's about rippling outward. And that's what your show is about and has always been about. And it's why you're so great, and you're better than Rogan. And we'll all say it anytime, man. But the reason you aren't getting those clicks and you aren't getting those hits is because he's a controlled fucking up. And it's one of those things where it isn't one of those things where he necessarily recognizes that he's being steered from on top. But if you're willing to go along with it just a little bit, then that's all it takes to get that drip, so that you want to set sail and you aren't willing to chill with your homies back on like solid ground. That's what's going down. So we just
yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, we just got to up the
For sure you
artistic
are.
value of the things we do. And Eric's work, what he's doing with like the UFO show, what I do with Conspiracy Synergy, to try and give like an introduction that we can offer to normies. What all of us are doing is creating that which will eventually, I think, reach like a point where we do get that exposure. We're not there yet because of the pre-existing infrastructure, but as that erodes, who knows, man? Maybe we'll hit one of those overnight things where one of us introduces others to the rest of us. And that's
I want to, sorry, but you're talking about like a cross promotional network, which is what Amazing Polly talks about. The new great gatekeepers, they're constantly cross promoting one another. So you can jostle the algos, and I know you weren't saying the louder you are traction. I was being sarcastic. Robert Epstein was on Jimmy Dore a couple weeks ago, and I clipped him saying, let me just get it straight. Virality is not an accident. It's not like winning the lottery. Sure, there are things that slip. And so, and I shared, I don't think it was with you guys, but overnight I had 300 new followers on Twitter. I was like, what's going on? And by the evening, it was like 1,000. This is like unheard of, even though I've been around for 25 years and I have street cred. Why? Because Rob Schneider retweeted a 2021 tweet. It was late at night. And I was like, oh, this is a good tweet. I'll retweet it. And then poof, next morning, like magic, like sprinkles. So, to your point, Ricky, like I thought, worked really hard, 5'5" brown girl from Montreal, and make a film, and it'll all penetrate. But now that I see Tavistock and this monolith, and not being, and you can be part of it and not be compromised. And like T said, you get, you get a sense, some people sell out, or they're not going to go all in and talk about the extent. I want to share also that regarding YouTube with the algos, I have a health journal. I have almost 1,700 articles. We were ranking 500,000 unique visitors a month. I was making $3,000 a day after building a company, 4 years. And then the Medic update came out, and that was in 2018. And it's like on the top of my mind because I'm at an Acapulco. My whole talk is health censorship in a techno-fascist age, and establishing, let's take a look back. We have a lot of evidence that this was a pandemic, but let me share with you specifically from the online health space what they did regarding. So the Medic update, they won't admit that it's called the Medic update, but the umbrella was anything under your money, your life. You're trying to better someone's life and make money, no more. You're going to be deranked, overnight 30% deranked. So if you're, benign step like how to videos, you could still work with the algorithms. But if you were actually at least in the realms of truth or in the realms of health, I'll share one more thing as an aside. In 2018, I was writing for a site called Care2, and they had a healthy living causes section, and thousands and thousands of articles of health, alternative health. You could sign up. It was a great gig, get paid, pitch stories. They sent us an email in 2018, and they said, you have a week to save your articles, or we're deleting. Not we're closing down the department. We are deleting, not archiving. And as I was putting together my talk, I'm like, they knew people were going to be on fucking lockdown. They don't want someone reading about vitamin D, God forbid. It's like, oh, I think I should go outside and get some, so they scrubbed all the health information. I just, one more thing, in 2018, I pitched the story to Marie Claire, and they took my idea. I was like, yay, the mainstream is taking my work again. They called, this was an article about CBD, 2018, called me, and we talked about the article, and she paused, the editor, and she goes, what are your personal views on vaccines? I'm like, all right, what? Like in my mind, I'm like, why is she asking me this? Oh, she went on my site and she saw that I've written articles, and they killed my story 2 days later. So this, this was in the works. And yeah, unfortunately, we are, we can't win against the algos, but we can band together. And like T was saying, and Steve, like we can cross promote. Yeah, thanks for letting me rant.
Sean, speaking of health, what's going on with your arm?
Well, that's an interesting story. And it falls right into this whole woke ideology here in the Bay Area. And you can probably, well, first of all, congrats on 500, brother. That's a big number.
Thank you.
And
yes, congratulations.
Thank you. I proved that you could do something 500 times and still suck at it.
yeah, well, just to tag on to whoever was talking about your content, right? And your catalog, and comparing it to like the people that Rogan has. Like when I first ran through your catalog, when I first, found you, I was like, oh, what? This dude's got so many good guests on his show. And it's like, I don't understand. I couldn't understand why you weren't getting more views until I started, getting into all of this, and, that all wrapped up. But to get back to your question, and you can appreciate this, you're in the building trades as well as me. I was assaulted by a woke apprentice on the job. It happened in March of last year. It's a crazy story. I know he's woke, and the DA who didn't charge him but charged me, and workman's comp found me not the aggressor, right? And is covering all the stuff, right? The DA said that there wasn't enough evidence on the video to charge this individual. The whole thing's on video. it's crazy. I'm living in this crazy world right now where this has been going on. My union didn't do any of didn't back me at all. They didn't do their investigation. They didn't get the video, right? All they did was piggyback off the DA not charging this individual and thinking, well, if they didn't charge him, then he must be guilty, right? So they ended up charging me $2,000, finding me guilty on four different counts. Check this out. The superintendent, because I was at a big hospital, right? Chain in the Bay Area. You probably know who they are, Marion. I'm not going to name them right now. The superintendent on the job site, this was what was it? It was a job that was at nighttime. So it was a double time, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. All right. I had nobody that I could call, right? The superintendent, who was supposed to be my next line of help, right? From this individual who I'd been dealing with for 8 hours or about 6 hours prior to this, who'd been verbally assaulting me the whole time because we were working in close confined space. And it was a crazy thing, right? The superintendent, I asked him for help, right? And if there's no safety person on a job site, the next person who's responsible for safety is the superintendent, right? I asked him twice to help me. I said, hey, man, can you ask this guy to leave? And he goes, I can't do anything. And there's way more to this story. I mean, it gets crazy. It gets even crazier. Like, the guy who assaulted me has a YouTube channel. And on his channel, he had 3 stories that says apprentice stories about his altercations with other journeymen in the trade. So, I mean, he literally has on his like a pattern of behavior through his own mouth, right? And it's crazy. This dude's a complete narcissist. My union didn't want to see any of that video. They didn't want to see the other video. They're so afraid of being sued by this individual. And this is the kind of guy, mind you, he's already tried to bring a female journeyman up on charges of sexual harassment. I mean, like, how many dudes do you know that would try to bring a woman up on sexual harassment? So, I mean, it's just crazy, man.
So you can't do anything. You can't get a lawyer, even though you have the video. Did you get the video?
No. So here's the whole
injury?
thing. Like,
What's
all the
the
videos.
injury?
Well, the injury. So what ended up happening was, I walked up to him, right? Because after all of this, we were gonna fight, right? We were in agreement to have mutual combat, and I saw the video camera, and I said, "Hey, let's take this outside." And so as we were both walking out, the superintendent pops out of somewhere, and he's like, "Hey, man, what are you guys doing?" Because I guess he had heard us like arguing a little bit, and so he's like, "Hey, where are you going?" And the dude goes, "I'm about to go outside and whoop this dude's ass." And he goes, "Oh, no, you can't do that. Don't do that." So he intervened there to stop us from going, right? In that moment that he did that, I had a moment of clarity, and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be this responsible person here. I can't be going out and fighting, right? I'm the journeyman. And so I changed my mind. And I said, you know what? You need to leave. And we're not going to be able to go. I'm not getting up in the ceiling with you again. So, you need to leave. And so I asked the superintendent, I said, can you have him leave? And he said, well, I can't do that.
Now, was it
Why are you here? You know what I mean? What are you doing here? Like, are you
he
selectively?
just potentially broke up a fight and
Yes.
then turns around moments later and says, I cannot have the guy who I just stopped from engaging in fisticuffs leave the building. That's yeah, I was at the
it gets
trades
better.
I was in the trades in
better.
Santa Cruz County for 20 years. So
Dude,
I mean, I understand the mentality.
It gets better. So even after that, right? I asked him, hey, can you tell him to leave? No. He's running around screaming, yelling, woo, 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 woo. He's gathering all of his stuff to what I think he's going to leave, right? He gets down to the end of the hallway. He stops and he starts recording me. and he's talking all kinds of whatever again, right? Trying to instigate, calling me all kinds of names. What they do. And I was like, all right, well, I need some evidence so I can show this behavior to my boss, right? Because this is 1:30 in the morning and nobody's awake. I don't have anybody that I can call. This guy is not helping me. He's not calling security. So as I'm walking down, videotaping this guy and asking him, hey man, you need to leave. I've asked you to leave. We're not going to work together, so you need to go. As soon as I got close to him, he slaps my hand and the phone, right? It's all on video. And I go to grab my stuff and I turn around trying to bring some distance away from us. And mind you, right after he did that, he said, shit's about to get real now, motherfucker. So to me, that's like, dude, you're trying to instigate this further than it needs to go. So I picked up my phone and I'm trying to create some distance between us. I go and look because the superintendent's sitting there with his back turned on his phone scrolling. You can see it as I'm walking past him in my phone.
What was his problem with you? Like you said he was woke. Like why did he have such issue with you? Was it because you
He was just he's an angry, aggressive black male. Straight up, right? And I know he's woke because I worked with him for 2 weeks prior to this incident. And he was constantly engaged in 400 years, you know what I mean?
So does he make money in all the other YouTube incidents? Is he collecting money every time he fucks someone up with his woke
Well,
mentality?
no, it's not. He just explained the incidents, right? And so these videos, which by he took them down. All right. So he took these damn things down. I screen recorded them, so I still have them. But it goes even further. So when he slaps it, I try to get some distance between us. I go and I look to the guy, right, to the superintendent. I said, dude, he just assaulted me. You've seen this, right? And I said, can you do something now? Can you ask him to leave? Can you get security? Can you do something? And he's like, no, I can't do anything. So at this point, I walk past him and I'm like, what do? I don't know where the security office is. I don't know. I know I'm in a hospital and I know there's that, but I don't know anything, right? So, anyways, he's stalking me now behind me. I turn around and he's right in my face and I try to brush away from him. And as I go around, as I brush away from him, he takes his hand. Have you ever broken up little kids trying to scuffle with each other? And one of them will always try and like hit the other one's face or something on the breakup. Well, that's what he tried to do. He tried to like backhand me with his hand. And at that point, I was like, dude, I hit him. I felt like I had no other choice but to defend myself because nobody else was coming to my thing. So I ended up hitting him. And when I went to grab him and like throw him against the wall, I slipped. My head ended up in his chest and he proceeded to beat the back of my head 10 times with his phone. So he used a weapon. All right.
This sounds like a Dave Chappelle skit. Like
Dude,
I can
it
almost
was crazy, man. And that's not even it.
blind power.
So
Remember when he was the blind KKK guy? No, nobody. That was hilarious.
Because he was using his phone and not his fist, if he'd been using his fist, it wouldn't have hurt, right? It wouldn't have hurt that much. I might have been able to wrestle him away. But instead, I was trying to like get some leverage to like throw him off of me. And when I went to do that, I dislocated my knee. When I went to pivot, we both fall backwards. My shoulder dislocates, and I'm laying there. He's getting ready to ground and pound me, and I wrap him up and lock his arms to my side. And in doing that, I tore my rotator cuff, tore my bicep. I tried to get up. Well, he gets up when I realize I'm bleeding out of the back of my head profusely, right? He gets off of me, and I try to get up. I don't realize that my knee's dislocated. It flies out from underneath me. I fall backwards. I see the pile of blood behind me, and I'm like, "Holy shit! Like, did this dude stab me?" Right? And I have no idea. So I lay back,
They are hung like horses. So I mean, maybe that's
Dude,
what.
I lay backwards, right? I can't move my arm, I can't move my leg. And I look back, and this dude's filming me going, this is what I do to motherfuckers that fuck with me. So to me, right there, you're a sociopath, dude, because I've hurt people before. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, holy shit, what did I do? Are you okay? You know what I mean? Like, I can't believe I did that. And like, this is crazy. And so there's way more to this story.
Can there be more?
Oh my God, dude. There's
You
so much more.
you have to come on AM Wake Up and talk about this, my dude. You really do. I am good.
Well, I
Yeah.
can't find it. So in the beginning of this, when I was trying to look for lawyers, they were like looking, they were going like, dude, you got to fight. What do you expect's going to happen? I was like, I was defending myself. And so they made me feel like I was a fucking piece of shit, basically. And so
Why? Because it's a black guy? It's because it'll be a racist
it's
shit?
return on investment. So in California,
California. So you
normally
want to touch
if you
that.
if you get in a fight, neither party is covered unless you can prove that you were defending yourself. And so workman's comp took like 90 days to do this whole thing, right? To do the investigation. And like I was going through like, okay, I guess I'm on my own, right? I was going through my own insurance, all my own things, and I had the surgery date. Workman's comp calls me and says, hey man, we investigated your claim and we deemed that you were not the aggressor. And because of the video where he slaps the phone out of my hand. Now, I don't know if they're using the video that I gave my boss, and then he passed it on to them, and they took the timestamp from that and the timestamp from when I hit him, when I struck him, and you would see that I clearly wasn't the one who started this, right? So I don't know. I don't know why the DA didn't charge him. I don't know why, dude. The whole thing is just fucked up. And I'm
Well,
trying to find attorneys, and they're either not returning my calls or they're pushing me off to other attorneys who aren't listening or aren't returning my calls. So I'm like, I don't understand. I don't get this.
Do you
Like
have
how
that video? Do you have that video? Did you
I have the
access-
video of the first one. I
No,
don't
do you
have
have
the
that? Is there a surveillance video?
I can't get it. Nobody
No,
will
you
give it
need
to
to
me.
get that. You need to FOIA that. You need to fucking get that video.
I can't.
Then
I've
you can
tried to
get
get
a
it from
lawyer. You
I've
need to
tried
get
to
that video. I will
I
help you get
try
that video.
I tried to do it, man. I went to the Fremont Police Department. They said you need a subpoena.
You can do a
I
FOIA. That's not what the fuck subpoena. It's your fucking case.
well,
Excuse
I
me.
was the star of the video. Why can't I see it?
That is BS. You start having a journalist call. Hey, I'm
Oh,
here.
my even
I'll
my
call.
union. My union, I tried to tell them, I said, hey, look, there's a video out here. So can you give me some time to get it? Because I have a workman's comp lawyer. And he said that he was going to demand the workman's comp file. And so everything that they use to determine eligibility or whatever should be in that file, which includes the video. But he never produced it yet.
Yeah,
It
I'm
didn't.
concerned that they scrub the video and you can go through legal, as let's say a journalist, if I do with the Fremont police and say, I want to FOIA. I know that it's difficult. I had a friend in St. Augustine who got beat up like a hippie, like waif who got beat up and they wouldn't give the video. They gave him the cops gave him a black eye. You couldn't get that video. I started calling as a journalist. I'm calling. I'm writing a story for the local wherever you live, and start. Yeah, put a little. That used to work. I don't know if it works anymore, but I'm
Well,
willing.
here was the thing. It's like ever since. So I was waiting to have the surgery, so I didn't have anything to do. Right? It's like I can't move. I can't do a whole lot. And the whole thing, I'm having to go through this again, right? That's the shitty thing about being injured. You got to go through it the first time, and then when you have surgery, you got to go through it all over again. And so I figured I'd be pissed off enough to start calling people up or wanting to tell my story. That's why I was hitting you up, Ricky, because I was like, dude, can you help me find somebody to where I can tell this story? Maybe get some California lawyers that will
Well,
hear
you're
it.
California, to quote my dear friend Miriam, who always has great one-liners. You're shit out of luck, and you're also the most demonized type of person in the world right now. You're a white male. Um, so you know, go in the opposite direction at the border and go to Mexico, and maybe they'd probably treat you better there than
No,
California.
no, Mexico.
Well,
No,
Sean,
I'm
if
saying like
you I tore my meniscus and I did stem cells, and I don't think it would have healed. It was a pretty bad tear. So if you need any regenerative hookups, I can put you in touch because it
Well,
does help.
the one good thing that has come out of all this, all right. So I've been off. It took a year for me to get the surgery. So in that time, I pretty much healed up, right? The 3 torn ligaments in my knee. I mean, yeah, my knee is a little bit shaky and it feels like sometimes it's going to pop out. But I mean, I could still do everything. And so what I got into doing was I started growing all my own shit. I started growing all my food. I started extracting cannabis oil and using Rick Simpson oil and Fico and doing all kinds of different things with it for my own pain, but also in my pets. My dog used to have those, that you get the little cysts that they have on those lumps under their skin. I started making him dog treats and I started taking him off of regular dog food. And guess what? Those lumps disappeared. And so after that, I was like, I mean, I already knew from the last, 4 years that, we were fucked anyways. But, I just, if they don't care about what they're feeding us, do you really think they care about what they're feeding our pets?
no,
You
the
know?
pet is nonsense. I mean, if you look at the ingredients, it's just fillers after fillers after fillers. I'm just like, how can you feed animals this? It's barely food, and so yeah, it's wild. You definitely need to go on AM Wake Up, and so Steve has some downtime to smoke while you tell this very long story, and fill some
Oh,
time.
yeah.
I'm kidding. But but yeah, it sounds like it's yeah, it sucks, man. I mean, that's kind of the thing about life, right? It's like from one day to another your whole world can be turned upside down, and be
I
grateful.
may not be able to work again in this capacity, right? Because all of the injuries were on my left side. So there's no offset. All my work is above my head and climbing up 10-foot ladders and then climbing up those towers and refineries.
I
You know,
had
those
a 18-foot fall from a roof on the job, landed on my feet on the concrete, and went to Dominican Hospital in Santa Cruz, if you're familiar. Yeah, so that shithole did not treat me well. And I was told by multiple doctors at Valley Med and at Stanford that I'd never walk or work again. And I didn't listen to them, and I didn't take their pharmaceutical heroin or anything like that. But I was in a wheelchair for several months and, on crutches and a cane for about 2 years, stuff like that. And workers' comp didn't cover any of my rehab or anything like that. Moving into a house in Lompico with 80 some steps to the door was my rehab.
and
Yeah, so I
workman's
get it.
comp
I
would have
like,
going through this whole thing with workman's comp. That is a very, very, very
oh, and my
wasteful
co-host too.
system.
My co-host on AM Wake Up, Chris Yannick, Rained Out Rantcast, is all currently going through a workers' comp thing, but in the state of Arkansas. So we can, definitely you'll have a very relatable atmosphere for sure.
Yeah. They're
Well,
very inefficient.
I'm glad we could end the show on such a positive.
Hey,
Light.
I'm smiling. You know what I'm saying? It's dude, I've been through worse. I mean, I went to prison and got out and, changed my life around. And
You
this is
Yeah.
just another this is
you didn't
just
Here,
another one of those hurdles, you know what I mean? That you gotta get over. And maybe it's
Susie,
my karma.
Susie was suggesting also PRP. Well, I don't know what true dose is, but I also did PRP to heal because I didn't want to have surgery. But, and also to your point, yeah, there's a lesson in everything, even just having injuries on your left side. That's your female side. That's your side of receiving. I mean, only you know the lessons you could learn in all this, but there's no doubt that there's woke ass people out there who are taking advantage of the system. And I think you should get that video.
Well, all you have to do is just look at the 3 that he put out there himself, right? And I didn't even have to, like, I didn't know about those. So like all sorts of information started flooding into me from other coworkers or other people in the union that had incidents with this person. And so this guy was running around for the last 5 years tormenting other people, and they were just too afraid to come out and say anything. He was intimidating them to the point where they were just scared to do anything, scared to say anything. And you know, here I come, somebody who's just, you know, I'm not going to put up with that. I don't care if we got my ass kicked. Fuck you. You know what I mean? it's
No,
it's
you're
crazy, man. And then I'm the bad guy.
well,
I just,
obviously, because you said he was black, you racist.
I know I'm racist. You know,
It is your fault he was born that color. It is. You should apologize on behalf of white people everywhere. I put my number in the Zoom chat. Make sure you get that.
Yeah, I
We'll
posted
connect.
on the YouTube channel. Dick pics are
so
coming.
I didn't mean to take up the whole
Safe
No,
travels to Mexico, Miriam.
thing.
Thank
Have a good,
you.
fantastic.
Thank you, over. Say bye. Sean, I think you needed to share it.
Get
to
it out. Yeah.
Get it out of
Yeah.
I mean,
you.
I've talked for 500 episodes. Why not let somebody else talk?
Congratulations, Ricky. Your show
Congratulations,
is
Ricky.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
It really is.
Happy
You've
500th
put out,
birthday.
yeah, man. You put out some incredible content for God 11 years. Jesus, man, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That is.
Like I said, I've learned that you could do something 500 times and still suck at it, and you could do it 500 times and still not know how to make money doing it. So I've learned some valuable lessons that you know, it takes a while.
It sure
Yeah, it's
does.
no doing of if anything, it's because you're doing such a good job. It's
I mean, this show has really been a blessing. I look back and I'm still like amazed by the people that have been on the show. But honestly, like outside of that, just the amazing people that I've met. You know, like Monica she has some personal stuff going on, and I'm thinking about you, Monica, and your family and whatnot. But like people like Monica, you guys, so many just amazing people that I truly consider my friends, and people that like this show was beautiful because we pushed back a little bit. We agreed on some things. But that's what life's about. Like, you push back again, with the people you love. And I'm comfortable doing it with you guys because I know that like, you're all good people and you're not gonna, talk shit because, or get mad at me because maybe we disagree on something. And that's how we all grow and learn. And I think that's also one of the reasons that we all love doing this type of work is because, we learn from each other and we grow together. We go on this journey together and we truly believe in the power of conversation. And some of my most interesting conversations haven't been with all those marquee people that have been on the show. It's been with guests like you guys. Like some of my most favorite episodes are with people like you, and really like talking to so many amazing people. Like it gave me the confidence of like not being insecure about my intelligence or my ability to hold a conversation, because that does happen. And and it just shows that like there's how popular or famous somebody is doesn't reflect how interesting they are or how much they can offer to a conversation, or how much you'll learn talking to them. And honestly, if I had to rank like all my favorite conversations, like a lot of those more popular, famous celebrities, for lack of a better term, like they probably wouldn't be up there. And some of the people that are just gems of people that like, like the people on today who I just ran into, been lucky enough to run into their work or have mutual friends or whatever. Like those are some of the deepest, most inspiring conversations. Those are the conversations that like when I hit upload I'm like, fuck, man, I'm contributing something. Like this is gonna help some people, or this is gonna, you know, make them feel better about their day because they realize how shitty of a year Sean's had. I'm kidding. But but it's true, like, you know, like one person's worst day is somebody else's best day, right? And hearing even just personal stories, like that's something I've learned too, that like you don't have to have a show that is just information, 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 information. You know, you can just share your own personal story and just share your own personal experiences, and people will appreciate that and just be honest and sincere, and people will connect and relate with that. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we've all been successful in our way, and why people like our shows and like our our interviews, and when we're on different shows, is because I think we're all honest and sincere. And if you agree with us or disagree with us or whatever, like, you at least know we're a real human being who are truly trying to do what they can to contribute something, and we're all kind of just figuring it out as we go, you know. And it's like becoming a parent. I know some of you guys have kids, and same thing, right? Like as a child, you look up at your parents, and your parents have convinced you they have it all figured out. Like, do what I say, this is how you're supposed to do things, and this is the way you're supposed to look at things. And then you become an adult and you're like, no, we're all kind of just figuring it out. And even as a podcaster, like I'll have people hit me up in my DMs and, like, you know, ask for advice on something, or ask for, you know, like my opinion on something. I'm like, dude, my opinion is just as good as your opinion. Like, here's my 2 cents. But like, we're all just like, I haven't figured it all out, you know. Like, I don't have, I'm not the all knowing, or just because I've interviewed a bunch of people, I don't, you know, like, my opinion isn't better than anybody else's. And we're all kind of just trying to connect the dots, and you know, put together the pieces to the puzzle. So without a doubt, the show would not be what it is today if it wasn't for all the gracious people who, you know, are willing to come on and spend an hour or 2 hours out of their day to chat with me. Because if you guys didn't come on, I'd be talking to myself. And according to many people who think I talk too much, I know that it'd be an unsuccessful show of me just talking to myself. I'm kidding. But yeah, it really is just a beautiful thing about, you know, the show, is that you can't do it on your own. You know, you've had some luck, and some of that luck has been Peace, Miriam, Susie, Sean, Steve, people writing me back and say, yeah, I'll come on. Yeah. You know, and that creates the show that I put out, and has built to the 500 episodes. So I can't thank you guys enough for all the support, and especially the group of people that have been on the show today. It just happens that the people who join us today, you also have been the biggest cheerleaders, not just of myself, but everybody else in the community. And I love that. Like, it really does feel like a community. And like, you guys are always so willing to help. And, you know, and anytime I can help, I try. If I can't, you know, like Scott said earlier, like, I've, you know, helped him out if he needed to contact somebody. If I can help, why not? You know, and he's done it for me. And it's funny, I was one of the inspirations for him starting a podcast. But and then I forget which big guest, like, he helped me get, because he had some connection. And I'm like, look, it all came back around, right? Like, and that's how the world works. And you know, you do good, and hope, you know, you do good for the sake of doing good, and because it feels good to do good. And then maybe it'll come around, you know. But if it doesn't, it's all right. It felt good to help somebody else. And it's like I'm talking about Christmas or something.
Thank you for letting us be a part of the journey, Ricky.
Thank
And I look
you.
forward to
Heck
seeing where we
yeah.
all go in 2024.
Well, before
Absolutely.
we say good night and goodbye, let everybody know what you guys are up to, and any of your work, and anything that you have coming up, anything you want to plug, please do.
May I go first? I'm gonna jump.
Yep, absolutely.
And congratulations again. I'm leaving for Mexico. I'm gonna go meet Charlie Robinson at Acapulco. I'll be speaking about health censorship in a techno-fascist age and how to navigate for truth. I'm very excited and nervous because flying has become quite unpleasant. And you can find me on Truth Lives Here on Rumble and Rockfin. I'm grateful for all of you. And oh yeah, my Substack, miriamhinane.substack, which I've been growing and putting a lot of love into. And my book will be coming out in the summer on George Floyd. And yeah, thank you, Ricky. Thank you. God bless you all, everyone. Sorry to dash.
That's all right. Safe travels.
Thank
ya.
you. Thank you. Bye.
Miriam Substack is awesome.
Miriam's awesome. I love her.
Yeah, oh, heck yeah.
Yeah. That's
I
a
was just
great
texting my friend
documentary
that. She's
she
like,
did.
who's that lady on the show? I'm like, oh my gosh, if you don't know her, look her up. She's fantastic.
Cool.
I'm heading to speak at a conference. I just got back from one, heading out to Georgia to Lanier Islands. It's next-steps.info. And it's all about solutions, food sovereignty, getting outside of the medical system, legal system, creating sustainable communities, but really just figuring it out at home, like gardening, taking care of your own family, growing your own food, getting satellite phones, like kind of the foundational stuff that you guys have been talking about for forever. This is going now to parents with young kids that are like realizing how important it is. So I'm excited to be there speaking with my business partner, Dr. Andrea Nazarenko. We have the Inspired Network, and it's just like we were talking about earlier, connecting people and like being that bridge, because yeah, censorship is real, but we all know someone that could help someone else. So we're really working to like bring us all together. And we are the one of the organizations that are leading the charge over in Geneva for the World Health Assembly. We'll be there we'll be there for 2 weeks, but May 30th, we're having a press conference. 31st, we're having a private event. And then the 1st of June will be our rally and march. We won't just be yelling and holding signs in front of the World Health Assembly as they vote on the public health treaties and IHR amendments. So we'll be educating the public about that. We know that we're not going to change the vote, but we still have to educate. Most people don't know even what's going on. So equipping people with what's happening to encourage them to hopefully stand up and start speaking out in whatever small way they can, whether it's with their friends or on a podcast like this or on a world stage. So that's my soapbox for you. It's the Inspired Network everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Substack, website, inspirednetwork.org.
Heck yeah.
Boys, who wants to jump in?
I'll jump in, and I hope you and Miriam travel safe, and it's really boring and uneventful and nothing at all remotely exciting happens while you're en route, because that's no fun. AM Wake Up's live Monday through Thursday, 7 to 10 with me and Chris. Wednesdays with Tease, Tuesdays with Ryan Christian, the Last American Vagabond. Fridays there's a show called The Independent Review that streams. It's like a kind of just a collection of independent media around the sphere, and that's a really cool thing that Ryan Graham has put together. AM Wake Up show for everything else, and then we have a Telegram group, t.me/AM Wake Up, that is ridiculously active and a lot of fun. And thanks, Ricky. Congratulations. 500 episodes is really huge. I don't care what other people have put out who have, freaking giant, massive amounts of funding and platforms and stuff like that. Dude, you crush it. Your show has a ton of value, and I really appreciate the work that you've done. And thank you for bringing me into the whole union of the unwanted sphere and stuff like that. It's yeah, you rock, man.
Thank you. I hate being the center of attention. I'm blushing.
I'll go next to get myself out of the way on the coattails of Steve as I co-host Wednesdays, which is When's a Good Day for Revolution Wednesday. So if you want to check out the AM Wake Up and watch us both try and wake people up, that's a good road. And Ricky's been on that show, and thanks again for having us all on yours and for doing the work that you do, and for being a wonderful, heartfelt gentleman in too cold world. So much obliged to you. As far as what I do, I'm an artist, writer, director, producer, editor, actor, illustrator, and podcaster. So it's a whole lot. It's a mouthful, but what I've done is I've created a show called Conspiracy Synergy, and it's the introduction for everybody into the realm of what we've all been looking into for decades. It makes it very fun, very engaging. It's the kind of thing that you can show to a child, not a very young one, because I swear a fuck ton. But other than that, it's a whole lot of fun, and it's able to get everyone up to speed on the basics. What I'm doing right now is I'm going out and I'm putting up these little posters. It's promotion for my show and AM Wake Up, and it's the plan to save the world. If you go to the Plan to Save the World section of conspiracysynergy.com, which is my website, Ricky, the link that you posted on your Ripple Effects clips for the culture section, I linked to it there. So that's how people can see that 5-minute section where it's all of us talking about how we can save the world. There's also the longer video that's 2 hours of over 20 different content creators submitting their own individual feedback on advice for everything from your own inner shadow work to what we can all do to work together to make things better. And that's the section of how to say, or the Save the World section of conspiracysynergy.com, which is all about us getting active, relaying, cross promoting, being the actual voices that will eventually float to the top because we aren't being co-opted and we're not full of shit. So thanks again for having me on board, and I appreciate everything you do, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thanks, Tease. Really appreciate it. Sean, are you still doing the disabled podcast?
The disabled podcast? No,
I'm kidding.
no. No, but I mean, my content, I haven't published anything since the incident happened just because I don't know, man, getting hit in the back of the head, I think that affected me quite a bit that many times. So, I mean, it brought on some depression and some other shit. But I'm trying to get back into it. But if anybody wants to check out what I'm doing, SeanDustin.com is where all my content is, my pod page. And I also do a lot of stuff on my social media channels with extraction, showing people how to extract cannabis and how to use the different solvents to make their own medicine, and educating people in that way, educating people on how to grow and pet food, how to make your own pet food. And it's like, these folks try to make you think that that your pet's gonna die if you don't feed them these commercial foods, that they're going to be unhealthy or anything like that. And just think about where these veterinarians are getting their training, and then also the pharmaceutical industry is tied into all of that too. And so it's a whole another smoke and mirrors thing. So if you're interested in learning how to, because my dog's my best friend, and if I can extend his life another 5 to 6 years to be able to enjoy him, because he's given me so much, he's my therapy dog. And so I want to keep him alive as long as I can. And I don't think that system is designed to do that. So I took the matter into my own hands, and it's working out. So if anybody wants to know anything about that, feel free to hit me up, SeanDustin.com. You can email me there. You can voice message me there. Yeah. Other than that, Ricky, congratulations. Like I said, dude, you rock. You're one of the one of the coolest guys that I never thought I would meet. Right? You are very kind, and so just your whole vibe and your soul. You got a kind soul, man, and I really appreciate you.
I appreciate that. I'm just an idiot who just have OCD, and when I start something, I'm all in, and I'm grateful for giving you an opportunity to get your story off your chest, because I know when we deal with some trauma, like sometimes you just need somewhere to get it out and people to listen. And against popular belief, I'm actually above average listener. So yeah, how about that comment section? I'm kidding. So but Sean, please do interviews, talk to people, start doing interviews again. I mean, it'll give you some, a purpose to wake up in the morning. I know you love podcasting because you did it for a long time and you enjoyed it. And sometimes when we hit rock bottom or close to it, we need to start doing those things we enjoyed again. And we obviously are all going to be pulling for you and hoping that this all works out and get better quickly, and and start podcasting again. Get maybe start getting people on, health experts who you can use some of that information to help with your own issues, and you can have firsthand experiences on recovery that you can share with the audience. So without a doubt. So glad to see you, Sean. Thank you, everybody who joined me tonight, and all the people who left already. I really, really, really appreciate it. Steve, you're a trooper. You're staying up late, and then you're also waking up tomorrow morning early for your show. So check out AM Wake Up. Follow Susie. She does amazing work on your Instagram page. You're constantly sharing stuff. And, if you want to keep updated on Big Pharma, she keeps a close eye on them and gives you, look who it is. Charlie.
Charlie's late.
Charlie's late.
Char- I was so close.
We were just hanging up and then Charlie comes in.
I knew I was gonna do that too. I knew I was
Charlie,
gonna-
you miss Sean's story. Sean, can you tell it again? I'm kidding. That was a joke.
You have to watch the replay.
I'm kidding. But yeah, you know Sean, he's here. We have Susie, Steve, we have Tease, we've had some other people. Miriam was here, who's actually was just talking about you. So Small World, you must have heard her.
I'll
Shoot.
be seeing her in Mexico in a couple days. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do I do now? Charlie, do you want to plug your show? What do I do?
What's that?
I said, Charlie, we were literally just finishing plugging our shows. I'm like, what do I do now? I started up.
Charlie, give us your thoughts on germ theory and the Jews. Okay, and let's
Well, first, let me start with
start
this.
there.
Just, never
Is
mind.
there a virus?
What do you do?
I'll just come in to say that I wanted to congratulate Ricky on 500 episodes. It's a huge accomplishment, and I just wanted to show some support. I didn't want to come in and hash out the Israel-Palestine situation. We're good.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm glad you at least showed your face. You are one of the many dear friends that I have made throughout this journey, and I truly appreciate it. This was awesome because it felt like a Union of the Unwanted type show, and
Yeah.
that show has been amazing for these type of things of just networking and not networking. I that sounds like a dirty word when I say networking, because it sounds like I'm just using people to get. No, it's like networking in regards to like just being able to meet other cool people. And
Right.
even in my own personal life, like this, I just try to be a cool person collector, and just like I meet somebody and I'm like, they're cool, let's bring them in and just create this awesome community where we can all push for each other and cheerlead for each other. And it's been a absolutely awesome journey. And also, Charlie, I mean, I remember it feels like now I feel like a elder. Like I was just yesterday, I remember you telling me to like the world needs another podcast, but I'm starting a podcast. And
Yeah, I know.
and then look what you've done, So I think we have a lot of inspirational examples for people to go out there and do something and just have a effect. I mean, look at Susie. I mean, she's traveling all over the US and she's having serious impact on the world. Tease is dressing up as a bunny, and I'm sure that helps with stuff.
Target practice.
But in all seriousness, like, and Tease has his niche where like he said, it's not necessarily kid friendly, but it's younger people friendly
Dude,
show, right?
It's such a smart thing, Ricky. Like all the people that you talk to, and I hear people on your show, and then they come on. I'm like, oh, I want to talk to them too. So you're like you're the connector. You know everybody, and
we all
so if
do
I
that.
need to talk to if I need to get a hold of somebody. I wonder if Ricky knows. I think Ricky probably. And Ricky's like, oh, I had him on 6 years ago. And you're like, okay. But I appreciate you as a talent evaluator, because so many of the people that you have on your show, I'm just like, damn, man, where'd you find that? I've never even heard of that guy. And Ricky's like pioneer. If you don't know about, you introduced me to Tease. I think Tease is a brilliant genius.
Well,
I agree with you, Charlie.
I know you agree with me. You should agree with me. I think I'm correct in my assessment.
What I love most about Tease isn't his genius; it's his humility.
I'm also very good at that, Steve.
But you know what I mean? He's coming in at a totally different angle, and like, thank you for that. I love that. That's fantastic. We need more.
Yeah, that's one thing, I have like it's not accidental. I consciously think about like, just I'll and again, like you say, like maybe you hear somebody on my show and then you think they're a great guest for your show, but I do the same thing with other people's shows. Like I'm constantly looking for just really interesting people. And I think it was actually Richard Grove who sent me one of Tisa's videos.
Yep.
And I'm like, and then I looked it up and I'm just like, this guy seems so interesting. And then the only interview that I knew of at the time was like on with James Corbett a while
Yeah.
ago, and I'm like, why hasn't more people interviewed this guy? This guy has some interest. Sorry, Tease,
No,
go ahead.
no, dude, you're so right, and that actually speaks to how this works, and it is the ripple effect. So I was on Corbett because I moved to New York to do Blindfold, which I know Charlie's seen. I don't know if you've watched it yet, and that's a short film that goes into 9/11 truth. And that was how I'd heard about Richard Grove, because one day on my Vimeo views it went up by a few hundred, and I'm like, what the hell? Why does anyone know who I exist? And it was coming from one of Richard Grove's interviews, and it was him talking about having seen my Blindfold because it was on Corbett. And then I reached out to him like, dude, do you want me to write for you? Do you want to work together? And he was like, shit, let's do it. So I was actually writing for Rich for a few months. We never went into production because that's kind of how those things go. If you don't have people backing you financially, you're never going to have a show to show. And where I'm at now was fast forward like 10 years of watching Ricky and Richard Grove and Corbett and everybody in the community. I'm sitting back here like trying to talk to you guys, like sending out emails. And I'll put it to you this: if you're out there and you're trying to get in contact with a content creator, you're much more likely to have them dignify your existence if you have your own show. That's kind of just the way that it works. So it's like one of those things where I'm like, I've been putting together a lot of the pieces here, and I want to hang out with these guys. I want to talk to them about it firsthand, and I want to show them off and introduce them to the world. And it takes like 15 freaking years of slow drip exposure before you're able to go there. And that's kind of just how this shit works. You don't hear about the best people. We're all talking about Rogan. Best people, they're hanging out here today because we're on the ripple effect with Ricky. So thanks for having us on again, man.
Yes, I agree with everything he said, and I suck at this. Even at my own wedding, I'm like, can we like pick a really short song for our dance? Like, I don't want everybody looking at
Sorry,
me.
I know, I feel like this is my fault. You guys were all done.
It's not your fault.
I came running in
It's all your
on
fault,
fire,
Charlie
pissed off,
Robinson.
mad about everything.
Did
I
you
just
just-
got it. Did you get have you guys had Simon Essler on?
No, the name sounds familiar. Who is he?
Oh, he's a guy from Toronto, a director. I just got done recording with him. Talk about an interesting guy. I'm just in awe. He's
We already
a
have too many
director. He's made
Canadians on this
movies.
show.
He's made shorts. He's super involved in like parental rights and parental
Ricky.
guidance and things. I mean, he's a fucking brilliant guy, man. Anyway,
Ricky, what was the craziest like couple of episodes that pop into your head when you think back on 500? Do we do any of that? Like, is there just a couple that you're like, that was just, I'm not going to say it's the best because you don't have a favorite kid, but holy crap, that was wild.
Well, here's all the people that I'll never have back on. I'm kidding. Those are actually just notes. But well, I definitely I'm sure people, longtime listeners, probably know maybe one or two people that I mean, 500 episodes. I obviously have had quite a few returning guests, but I've had a lot of one-time guests, and honestly, there's like a handful, like there's one or two or maybe three that I can pick out that I'm like, I probably wouldn't have them back on. And it just, even though it's good information, even though maybe they have something to offer, it's like I gotta kind of like the person a little bit, or it can be torturous, and then I've had some like absolutely amazing moments where like, like I've told this story before with Dr. Jessica Rose. It was Dr. James Lyons Wheeler, Dr. Jack. He's the one who's like, hey, you got to have Dr. Jessica Rose on. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, anytime you've given me a recommendation, I'm like, typically they're good. So yeah, let's do something. And then time went by, and he's like, hey, when are you gonna have her on? I'm like, oh crap, I forgot about her. I'm like, yeah, let's just book something ASAP. And then we booked something, and then I didn't have time to look her up. And then it was like the day of the show, and I'm like searching her, and I couldn't find anything on her. Like, she hasn't done any interviews, and I only found like one little interview about, because she was actually a surfer and a musician, like stuff that was not related with like what she was coming on to talk about. And then so I'm like panicking, like it's a blind date or something. And then we end up having like a 2 hour, podcast, and we just start talking about heavy metal. We started talking about like Slayer and Fear Factory, and I'm just like, wow, this is not where I thought this conversation was going to start off. And then it just went awesome. So it was like, it's cool to have those type of things. And but there's also like never like I still haven't found like the perfect recipe to like try to spark the best podcast, right? And I don't think, and then eventually you just kind of stop searching for it, right? It's like I'm human. There's going to be days I'm going to be lower energy. There's going to be days where I'm going to be scatterbrained because I have all these personal things that happen. I got attacked by a big black guy, whatever. And I'm sorry. And but in all honesty, like you guys all know, like we're all like we're average people. We live pretty average lives, and but we also have like typical issues too, where it's like, okay, money's tight, or, like maybe we have to move, or maybe, work's sucking, or whatever, or maybe we have some relationship with a friend or family or significant other that like or it's kind of rocky, and that does have effect on your show. But like that's kind of what makes us human. Like I don't get the people that always sound the same, always look the same on every single podcast. Like I'm sure it's possible, but it's not me. Like I don't record at the same time, I don't do anything the same because it's like, life's too crazy and I'm kind of okay with that. I also don't try not to record too much too often because I also want to extract, from my life and my experiences and have some time to like let these ideas ferment a little bit. One thing that people who've been listening for a long time will pick up on, like, I don't really jump into like current event stories and have a strong opinion on them. Like, I usually will have somebody on, I'll pick at their brain, but you won't hear me have a strong opinion on something that just happened because I need time to kind of like filter out everything and like really think about it. And I know it's really good for clicks, like, oh, let me just have a really strong opinion on some hot topic right now, but I'm like, that's not me and that's not my purpose. So it's just, yeah, I don't even know what the question was,
But
but
that's good, Ricky, because then you're not as emotionally charged with your when you're talking to people because you're not automatically bought in. You're sort of like ready to hear both sides. I think that makes you a better interviewer because you're listening and you're allowing you're not allowing your emotions to get in the way of talking to someone that you might not totally agree with. Have you ever had like an argument during your show?
oh yeah, I mean, I've had plenty of like little friendly debates. I mean, Dr. Robert Lusting, who he did the Bitter Truth lecture that went viral about sugar. He's in like every sugar documentary. He's in, he was in Sugar Coated. He was in a bunch of different things. I remember button heads with him at the very end of the show. Like we talked for like whatever hour, 90 minutes about big pharma. And then at the end of the podcast, this was during like COVID era, the height of it. He's like says something about COVID or the vaccine. And I'm just like, wait, what? And then we like, we butt heads a little bit. As you know, Charlie, I also butt heads with the first time Dennis McKenna was on my show. We talked
Oh
about
yeah.
plant medicines and we talked about all the, things we agree on and things we love. And I love Dennis. Dennis McKenna I remember the first time he was on my show, he wrote me a big email about how much he enjoyed the conversation and he loved how casual it was. And we just had an awesome relationship and we would stay in contact from time to time. But then the second time he was on, I think was right around election year. And we learned that no matter how many psychedelics you do, you can still be brainwashed
That
because
was a crazy episode, Ricky.
yeah, and he just so for people who are listening who don't know what we're talking about, like he went on this like complete anti-Trump pro Joe Biden rant, and I'm just like, all I hear from like Rogan and many others is like, if we just give everybody mushrooms, we'll be happy. I'm like, has done tons of mushrooms, and he's still like the social engineering still works apparently. So that was interesting. I remember Charlie, you might know the guy. I forget his name. John Brankus. He was the guy who did sports science. Do you guys remember sports science was a big segment on?
You told me about, yeah, I remember you telling me about him, but I didn't.
Yeah, well,
haven't-
I've never had him back on. I'm sure he'll probably not come back on it again. I'm sure, but I remember he reached out, want to call. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, dude, I love your show. I'm like, let's, and I like to do different episodes on different things. He was he was actually quite popular in the sports world. He had a segment on ESPN called Sports Science, and they would have professional athletes and kind of break down the incredible things they were capable of. But I remember we had him on and we talked about like I actually hooked him up with like Rupert Sheldrake's contact info because he was a huge fan of Rupert Sheldrake. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Um, and we're talking about Rupert Sheldrake, who's kind of a controversial scientist, and because he goes against the grain, his Wikipedia says pseudoscience. But Rupert Sheldrake's awesome. And I had him on and we're talking and we're riffing. And then after the show, he's like, hey, you stop recording? And I'm like, where is this going? And and then he starts talking about like how much he loves my shows on like all the deeper conspiratorial stuff. And I'm like, we should have talked about that stuff. And he's like, oh no, I can't talk about that stuff on air. And I'm like, oh geez. And then I'm like, and I think I remember asking him, like, I'm like, hey, how many people in Hollywood and celebrity world are like you? You know, like they're into this stuff, but they just feel like they can't talk about it. He's like, a lot. He's like, he'll have conversations at parties with people to go down some rabbit holes. And because Charlie, you worked with athletes and stuff, right? And now during COVID, some athletes have stepped up and actually been outspoken again, with their views. But like, I'm sure you experienced that too, right? Like they all have like this persona that they have to. I think that my cat has gone in my studio, but because I just heard some loud noise. But right? Do you find that to be true?
Oh, I mean, I think a lot of them are interested in the things that we're interested. They're just like us. They're curious. They sit around with a lot of time on their hands, nothing else to do, sitting in hotel rooms, sitting on road trips and shit like that, watching videos, looking at.
Because you help athletes you help them understand how to.
We did media training. Yeah. Get them ready for interviews, public speaking, ready for interviews with general managers and coaches and scouts, and eventually, if they wanted to, get them into broadcasting.
Yeah, and you said one of your greatest failures was Charles Barkley, right? I'm kidding.
No, I've never met Charles.
Couldn't get through to him. He just
Charlie's responsible for Isaiah Thomas.
Oh God.
But yeah, check out Macro. So is that interview coming out? You recorded it today. Were you on his show?
It'll be out in a couple weeks, but yeah, it was just a reminder. I mean, I'd had him on before and I'd had him on my radio show. We were talking about cultural Marxism and he was just so right over the target. I was like, God, how does everybody not know who this guy is? His shit is so concise and amazing and like quotable. And so anyway, yeah, I just recorded with him, and that's why I was hoping that I could get off in time so I could jump on with you and say congratulations on 500. So I'm glad I was able to make that happen, and thanks for having me, Ricky.
No problem. And just one more thing. I know Steve, big Julian Assange guy. He fights a lot for that issue and talks about it a lot. That reminds me of like some of the most like just stories that pull my heartstrings have been the whistleblowers I've had on the show. Like, Thomas Drake, Michael Sandel, he's the guy who was the oil for food scandal, the UN scandal. There's actually a movie called Stabbing. Oh my God, what the hell is it called? I'll have to look it up. But when he was on, it was absolutely just like it's crazy the stuff that they could go through because just to do what's morally right and just how their lives are ruined. I mean, when you hear Thomas Drake talk about like he couldn't get a job anywhere, he ended up working at like an Apple store, and this guy was
that's scary. He was the NSA whistleblower.
Yeah, he was the guy who inspired Snowden. Snowden said if there was no Thomas Drake, there would be no Edward Snowden. And so when you hear stories like that, Abraham Bolden, who's the first, I mean, Sean's not gonna like him, but he was the first black Secret Service agent on a presidential detail. That's actually true, not the Sean part, but he was on my show. He was he was literally at the time when he was a Secret Service agent, they didn't trust minorities to guard the president. So they like threw him in the laundromat or like somewhere in the laundry room or something like that. And JFK just happens to walk in and make small talk with him and ends up liking him. And he's like, I want this guy on my detail. And goes on his detail, and then he becomes a JFK whistleblower story because he ends up wanting to testify in front of the Warren Commission. They end up like putting him in prison in some insane asylum, and really didn't talk for many, many years because he was afraid for his life. Like he didn't get out of this the insane asylum until the doctor that was keeping him in there committed suicide, hung himself. Like his story's insane. And I just like sat there and listened to this guy. I'm like, this guy's a historic figure. He came on to actually, this was during the Obama administration because that's how long I've been doing this. He actually came on to try to clear his record because his family's like, dude, you need to clear your record. You're a historic figure. And instead, nobody knows who you are and you have a criminal record, and it was all because he was exposing what happened with the JFK assassination. His story is phenomenal. He has a book called The Echoes from Daily Plaza. He worked with Mark Lane on that book. I believe he inspired him to write it. And but people like that, John Barber, I don't know if you guys know who that is. He's another guy. Speaking of JFK assassination, like this guy's just known everybody in Hollywood forever and just has the most crazy stories. Like you just sit there and just listen. And when I had Jesse Ventura on, it was crazy. When I had Ricky Ross, Freeway Rick Ross, and he's on like his cell phone, and he's like in the middle of the interview, he's like, "Yo, this dude knows my story." Like, yo, I give you. He's like, you know how many people have me on? They don't know my story. And he's like, I'm like looking at my wife. I'm like, I just got street cred. Ricky Ross is like impressed with like my knowledge of his story. I'm like, I just got street cred from the guy who started the crack epidemic. So weird
Got
thing
his cell phone number too.
yeah.
Met him at a
That's pretty cool.
Oh,
I
did
was
you?
getting ready to go through customs with him because we were on the same flight and we had been talking the whole way back. And I said, "Hey man, if it's all right with you, I'm gonna let you go ahead and go like well ahead of me as we go through customs." He just started laughing.
Dude,
He's like, "No, he's like, I know." He's like, it's always a pain. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
cool dude. But yeah, Ricky the Rolodex, man. You meet all these people, and I mean, having John Barber on it, dude, that's a big, that's a big guy to get.
And I've done
Always
so. I
sort of
remember I had a
way
debate
ahead
with
of the curve on that stuff. You're
I
bold.
put
I
together a
respect it.
debate with Adam. You guys know Adam Kokesh, right? Like Adam Kokesh
Yep.
was the friend of the show, and back in the day, I had him. I put together a debate with him and Hunter Motz, who anybody who's a longtime listener of Brian Callen, it used to be his co-host, Brian Callen, for it used to be called the Brian Callen Show, and then eventually Mixed Mental Arts. And Hunter and I became friends, like super friendly. He actually was in Connecticut one weekend, and I ended up hanging out with him and recorded a podcast on my phone, and actually did really well in downloads, and which was weird. I'm like, why am I spending so much time editing? But he super nice, like had him on, and just like hearing him personal upbringings with like Brian Callen, and just like getting to know, and then obviously meeting Sam Tripoli and becoming friends with him, and just just hearing like somebody's perspective on Rogan, who like actually was on his couch when he was still in like single digits of shows, which is pretty wild. And just having like these weird connections. I'm just like, this is fucking crazy. We all, many of us were a part of the Roseanne Barr show recently, and it's insane. I mean, I grew up watching Roseanne. I thought she was hilarious. I mean, I thought it was just a amazing show about like the most average family and all the crazy stuff that happens in like the average lower middle class family, right? And
That was like the most relatable show in the world to me.
yeah,
Like my dad kind of looked like John Goodman too.
That one definitely slipped through the cracks.
what's that, Roseanne? I think it did pretty well.
No. It was a great show. It's crazy that actually made it. You know what I mean? With a lot of the stuff that was on there, but I
Oh,
love the
they
show.
hated her at the time too, man. Like they kept trying to throw monkey wrenches at her. She was talking about, shut up. Yeah. I enjoy Roseanne's comedy.
Yeah, Kevin
very much.
Sorbo. I grew up watching Hercules.
Yeah, you had
and
Kevin Sorbo on. Like, what the fuck?
Kevin's, which is pretty wild. And then Kane. I know some of you guys aren't wrestling fans, but like having Glenn Jacobs was like wild. I mean, I grew
Did
up.
you ask Kane if he would play guess the name of Vince McMahon's dildos? Did you play that game? Because I had Billy Ray Valentine on for that, but I would have loved to have asked Kane.
Well, we'll have to get well, Billy's been telling me forever that he's like we got to do a wrestling show, but it's like it's like one of your like I don't want to publicly let everybody know I like wrestling. Like that's like one of those things you don't tell people, unless you know they're in, then you're like, "Oh, okay, he's cool." Like and then you like show them your like your Ultimate Warrior shirt you're wearing underneath or something, but yeah, it's like well, the thing is, as a foreigner, like when I came to America and my parents and I like were learning the language, like you knew the storyline even if you didn't understand the language, right? Like you know who like this is it's just gonna sound weird, but the two shows that I grew up watching with my parents that like was a big part of my upbringing was like the Three Stooges. Get it? You didn't have another show you didn't have to like know what's going on verbally, and wrestling. And we would grow up watching, and then obviously as I got older, I got out of it, and I didn't get back into it until my kids. Like during COVID, there was nothing on, so I downloaded the WWE app, and I'm just like, you know what? Let's go back and watch some old stuff, and we would go back and we started watching every Royal Rumble, and the kids got into it, and then we kind of started watching it again as a family, just because it's something we can kind of all enjoy a little bit. Yeah. So, but the Vince McMahon thing is crazy. His story is insane though. But that's that idea of hurt people, hurt people. It's so true in every case. Like you get some scumbag, somebody who's done some horrific things, then you learn about their upbringing. Like he was molested, and he had a really messed up childhood too. And then it wasn't until afterwards that his real father that he ended up connecting with, and he got into the whole wrestling industry. But it's sad because it's like hurt people do hurt people, and it's like it sucks to see victims become victim creators, and it's like you sympathize with them a little bit, but in a way you also can't help but demonize them because they are responsible for their actions. So it sucks, but that's another podcast for another day. But thank you again, guys, for staying up late with me, and I really really appreciate it. I need to send AM Wake Up some money for coffee in the morning, which you might need. Sorry, Steve, for keeping you up. And
No, dude, I'm West Coast time, buddy. You're fine. It's now 7 o'clock.
oh, okay,
We're good. We're good.
And so thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you again. Hopefully, I see you guys all on the Ripple Effect podcast very soon. Listeners, check out their work, and we'll talk again. Thanks, guys.